So being 7 o'clock, I'll open the meeting. I have some bills.
Okay.
I have Bill Scanlon. Payroll in the amount of $3,360. I have James payroll in the amount of $920.26.
Motion to accept?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bill, do you want me to go through these extensions and get them over with first? Or you want to wait?
Sure, yeah, might as well.
Yeah. I have a letter from Paula Scotta. Dear Jane, I hereby request the annual extension of the approved Jane St. Mary's Way subdivision. They're looking for an extension to November 17th, 2019.
Which one is that?
That's the one off of Stafford Street.
All
It's a
right.
4-lot
St. Mary's.
subdivision.
Okay.
I have talked to Thaddeus Scotta about the project, and he has a couple of things he needs to do to wrap it up. He's looking at street lights and a street sign, and he's doing some of the landscaping now. So his intent is to be able to get everything done in time for the town meeting to accept the road in May. So he's moving along, and hopefully he can meet that timeframe.
Now, is there anything with any of the plantings he's done as far as against the neighboring?
Yes, I got an email today, and then I spoke with one of the abutters. The subdivision plan calls for planting of pine trees along the road. It's clearly shown on the plan that the planning board approved. The neighbor that called thought that when the pine trees grow up, they would shade her pool, so she was a little concerned about that. And I told her that, it was on the approved plan, so there wasn't a lot we could do about it, but I would bring it to your attention to see if you wanted to, if you had any suggestions or if there's anything you wanted to do about it.
We rarely choose pine. Not that we chose anything. That was something that they must have put on the plan.
I pulled the plan out today, and we looked at it, and, it shows white pine trees.
All right.
It's rare for us. Can they work together to,
If you like, I could call Thaddeus and see if he's willing to make some changes, but then you'd have to come into the planning board, I think, for a modification.
do we want to,
I mean, it's on the approved plan. I hate to say that this,
Well, that was sort of my
Yeah.
feeling too, but,
yeah. All right, so I was just asking about something that was different than what was on now.
oh,
Now I get all the information if you guys are.
okay.
okay.
So, well, I'd like to make a motion to approve that letter, the extension.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
A letter from Peter Engel from Barton Engineering. Good morning, Bill. We would like to request that the Pecori hearing be continued to the next available meeting as there were minimal outstanding issues that we had to address. So they want to continue to November 14th, 2018. Do we have time?
We do, we had them scheduled already.
Okay.
Make a motion, we approve that?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a release of covenant for,
You may recall, we talked about this at the last meeting for Ellie Pond Estates. They wanted to revoke their tripartite agreement and put a couple of lots back under covenant. And you had agreed at the last meeting to do that. So they went ahead and prepared a new covenant form. They haven't notarized, so we would ask that you, if you have any questions, fine. If not, just go ahead and sign it. And then we will mail it back to the applicant for recording.
didn't know issues, right? We have to vote on this? We already voted on
You voted on it last meeting, so I think, okay.
Is there anything in there that's surprising? There's no?
No, standard.
Are these just two copies or just separate?
Are they both notarized?
Yes, that one is this
Then
one.
why don't you sign both, and then I need to notarize them as well. I would like to just bring up the planning director for a moment. I'm going to suggest that we advertise the position in the National American Planning Association website. I think that'll give that position a much, broader reach throughout the entire country. It costs $295 for 4 weeks and $195 for 2 weeks. We have money in the budget to cover that cost, but I would like your permission to go ahead and place the ad there so that it will be seen by more than just New England people.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I think the 4 weeks is probably a good idea since it's leave open for a little bit longer.
It's also back up on MMA and the Connecticut and Massachusetts APA chapters, and it's still on Indeed.
Okay.
Although we haven't had much success with
You
Indeed.
change the search engines on Indeed?
Yeah, I
the
sent
title?
them an email. I don't know if they've done that yet, but
Okay.
I suspect they will soon.
Okay.
So that's about all we can do in
Thank
terms
you,
of
perfect.
outreach.
Should we make a motion for, do we have a yes, right? You want a motion because,
Yes, we'll need to authorize each.
I make a motion that we advertise it in the national review.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. What time?
We did KMN already.
Yeah. Yes.
The alternate. On 7 o'clock.
So, we had, do we want to do alternate now?
Yes, I believe you have a request from John Smith to be considered for the associate position on the planning board. I think he looks very capable. I suggest we bring him in for an interview, and so you can talk to him and see if you think he would be a good fit.
Perfect.
Yep.
How long has that been advertised? Don't we have to have it advertised?
It's been on the website, Jane, for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Okay, I just want to make sure.
absolutely.
I'd like to make a motion, we bring them in for an interview?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
We have a continued public hearing for Lunar Meadows, the solar site plan.
Evening, folks.
Want me to do first?
My name is Christopher Nolan from the Beta Group. We're the consultant for Sunken. This is Stephen Borgatti. He's our engineering designer. Mr. Scanlon informs me that we did not have the stormwater changes reviewed by Mr. Andretti yet. So we're going to try to move through all the other issues that we think were outstanding, except for the stormwater. And then I'll let Mr. Scanlon speak when he wants to put that step out to that hearing. This is a 5-megawatt solar ground-mounted project on a site on North Sturbridge Road. It's a 31-acre site, almost 32 acres. We'll be clearing about 21 acres of the land. Very limited impervious surfaces. We have a gravel access road proposed. And we've made minimal changes to that in order to protect the wetlands which are adjacent to the project. Other proceedings I think of interest is a current proceeding in the Conservation Commission. They are also just waiting on that final representation from Mr. Andretti about the stormwater plan, and then they're prepared to issue their order of conditions, what they think they've called the standard order of conditions. And the planning board also approved the definitive plan in here. I think the appeal period expires next week, so but sometime next week you'll be getting some Mylars, definitive plans for the Luna Meadows to execute. I'm not going to belabor what we did last time we were here. There's been a slight change to the waivers that we requested. We had initially requested that the waivers allow us to submit a plan of 1 to 800. We've reduced that as a result of the one of the peer review comments, and now we're requesting a waiver to 1 to 400. I think Mr. Andretti is in agreement with that. His response to the changes that we've made seems to indicate that the only remaining issue is a stormwater issue at the low point in that access gravel road. Again, I guess we'll speak to that at another meeting. Also on is the scenic road special permit. We're moving about 20 feet of plus or minus a stone wall. The plans make it clear that we've moved that so that it now will flute down the access road. So instead of going across the entrance, it'll continue. And as much stone as we have, we'll just build it down the access road. So there'll be a nice access road entryway. There's also a public tree removal hearing, which had been continued to today. Is that still on, Mr. Scanlon?
Is Seth there?
No.
Yes, he had opened the tree hearing at the last meeting. I don't know whether he's closed that yet or not. So we should talk to him to see whether he's satisfied with, I know he's approved the cutting of the trees, but we can.
Can we make sure that he's invited for the,
Okay.
or at least you get a comment from
Sure,
this
okay.
for the next.
For the next meeting? Yeah.
Come back
We
anyway.
could close, we have to come back anyway, so if you can be invited to the next one, we can close that, that'd be
Okay.
great. So at this point, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to go through the visualization package that we put together. I'm going to try to get the board to see this one, and then Mr. Borgatti is going to try to let the interested abutters see that one. So if there are any interested abutters, maybe you can move up into this area so you can see this presentation. All right. The first part we did was the entrance. Oh, actually, I did a couple overhead shots to sort of give you an idea where we stand here. Here's our access road. This is abutter 1. This is the house that's being built at this moment. It's not yet built. So we have some, not really some visualizations, but we have some photographs. This is owned by Jason DuBois, who's a local engineer. He's actually in the Conservation Commission right now. I just spoke to him. He's going to review that stormwater issue that we talked about, but he is satisfied. He told me that I can represent that he's satisfied with the screening that we've done, both along the access road and back at the back fence, which is back in here, also behind his property. That would be his property in this area there.
Chris, what are you proposing for screening?
I'm sorry, say that
What are
again?
you proposing for screening?
Steve?
Well, I'm not, the exact species list is all listed on this plan. This design was done by a landscape architect that works out of one of our other offices.
White fir, eastern red cedar, white spruce, white pine, black chokeberry, high bush blueberry, Vaccinium, Corbosium, which I don't know what that is. There's a number of Juniperis virginiana. I don't know what all these are. Some sugar maples.
I know what that is.
Mostly all the trees are 5 to 6 feet height when they're planted.
Could you show us where those will be planted?
I can. We've added screening.
Fence line here. and then
This is the landscape plan. This is a new page to the plan, an entirely new page. We added screening, so we have screening down this side of the driveway, into this little open area here, all along this back fence through here. We stop here, and we'll show you why when we get to the visualizations. We figured that was more than was required to actually provide any screening. So the rest of this is there's no more added around here. We did add some here. Even though we weren't asked and we hadn't done anything with this, when I was out there, and I was looking at the entrance, I noticed that there was some visuals from here of not just the entrance, but through into the back. So we've added trees along there and at the back piece to protect that neighbor as well. So that's the screening we've added, and as you can see, we've added it's fairly thick. We've made it so that it's a screen. It's not just some random trees, and it's a variety of locally sourced varieties. So that gives you, again, a sense of where it is. And we've got some visualizations here, 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 and here. We don't for the two near the entrance, but we do have some at the entrance. As you can see, there's a significant distance between the houses, particularly the further away you get here. The other thing that happens here is this is the high spot. As you go down here, each of these houses is successively lower than the ones, so you're sort of falling down as you're going, and it's like that. You get a reasonably good look at it like that here. This is the entry. This is where Mr. Dubois is building his new house. This is clearing that was done by Mr. Dubois. This is our property flag here, and we have another property flag about in there. So this is the very western side of where our access would be, and you can see there's some stone wall in there. This is the far eastern edge of that stone wall. Probably shows, I think, 2 of the trees that we propose to take down. And I took sort of 5 photographs along the face of the front. So this would be the next piece of the front. Center eastern, center, center western, and then the western edge. And this one didn't quite make it under the stapler. How you handle the unexpected, right? And here's the visualization. The visualization did not show the stone walls and doesn't show the house next door. And what we did is, this is the visualization is how it would look. We've added screening at this corner. So this is a visualization of the entrance. It does not account for the stone wall, and it doesn't account for the clearing performed by abutter 1 or the existence and reconstruction of the stone wall. We have added screening, as you can see, along that side, along this side. There will be screening. This visualization doesn't show it, and you can see a little bit of the array here. What we've added on the plan, you can see we've added screening that comes around this corner on both sides, going back into the array there.
Chris, I'd also add, in response to one of the fire department comments, we're also proposing a bar gate about 20 feet along the road that's crossing. It's not shown on this visualization, but it is shown on the plans.
Right, this is starting to get, this is Jason Dubois. This is the first property to the west of the entrance. This is him looking back behind him. This is him looking toward actually toward the road. You can see the stone wall, and this is where our road would be. There are no visualizations. We have added screening to protect Jason. And like I said, I reviewed it with him, and he's satisfied with that. He will be here, he said, at the next meeting when we talk about the stormwater. And he's going to make a point of talking to Mr. Andretti about that in the interim. This is Mr. Miller, who happens actually to be here. Mr. Miller's in the audience. He's the next abutter, and probably the only abutter really that has any chance of being able to see any of this because of the way that it's designed. This is an actual photograph from Mr. Miller's yard. This is a visualization. The way we did the visualization, we took them basically at the roof line, and then we jumped up from the roof line. It'll give you an idea. You'll see him here. So this is from at about his roof line. This accounts for the clearing, and you can't see the project. The next one up, I think, gives you a pretty good idea of why you can't see the project based on the elevation. So in spite of that, we have added screening at the fence line. Next property over, 271 North Sturbridge. Again, same visualization, photograph of the house, same visualization, doesn't appear to be able to be seen.
Chris, could you go back to that? Is that
Yep, sure.
the height of the existing trees, or is that the height of the trees?
It's the existing trees,
Mature?
this is existing, this is existing,
Okay, okay.
correct, yes. So again, this is at the roof line height. This is that overview, it gives you an idea. Again, we didn't think they'd be able to see it, but we did add some screening at the fence line in any event. Oh no, I'm sorry, we did not add, we only added for the first 2 abutters. I don't think there's any additional screening added for this abutter. Is that correct, Steve?
I don't believe so. And also the abutter on the east.
That's at the end, the
We'll
last
get
one.
to, yeah.
I'll get to that. All right, so this is the next one over. There's a view from the house, roof line visualization.
Can you point out where about the solar panels are on that photo?
Back over those trees,
Okay.
all right? And then again, this one will give you the idea of where the solar panel is in relation to the house.
Okay, good.
So we tried to get the roof line and then above so that you can see where, how that broke out from. It's not necessarily, it's hard to know what people want with these things, so I tried to do the best we could with what we had. So, no additional screening was proposed for this abutter. And again, it doesn't really show that well here, but this is actually fairly down. It's because the road continues to drop down as you go further to the west. That's another representation of the same. It's the next house down. Roof line, project over here.
How about in the wintertime, Chris, when the leaves are off the trees?
The distances of the trees, it doesn't make any difference. It looked the same, it just didn't have any green on it when we tried to do some visualizations because of the amount of distance that there is between, unclear distance between the back of these houses and the actual clearing limits. So no additional clearing there. Again, I'll move through this. This is the next house down. Again, this is a house that has like two houses on the same parcel sort of thing. I'm not sure how the whole thing breaks out from an ownership perspective. So I might have the parcels a little misnumbered, but there, as you see, there's a blue house and then there's another house. So this is the blue house. Fit picture, visualization from that house and sort of from this one. And that's, again, it's falling way down and that's the visualization you get from above. Not be visible from here. I spoke to this abutter, he's satisfied with the project, the gentleman who lives in this house here. This is sort of the same one, this is from the next backyard over, so I think it's sort of the same visualization, but instead of it being the backyard of the blue house, it's the backyard of this next house here, this whitish one. Whitish yellowish one here. There you go, visualization from there. And then we moved to the east of the access road. This is, when I was there, as you can see, I looked through here and I could see that you potentially had some issues here
To the west, right?
and here. This is to the east.
okay.
This is one parcel to the east of the access road. So that would be this parcel here. And, yeah, when I was there, I realized that we probably should have done something there. So I took some pictures and we've added screening as a result. And that's another project. Any questions on the visualizations or what our motivations or intention or anything else?
Just one clarification on abutter number 4. You said there was no additional screening, but this says there is consideration for additional screening.
If there is a, abutter 4.
No, maybe it was 3. Maybe it was 3. Yeah, you just said additional screening at the fence line has been proposed.
For abutter 3?
Yeah, for abutter 3. Is that true? Just
Yeah, I
wanna
think
make it-
that's
correct.
correct.
Okay. When you said before, you said no.
Okay, I might have made a
Yes.
mistake.
Okay.
I think so.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Let me see the,
Yeah, butter 3 is at about the tail end of.
The screening?
This is a butter 3 right here,
Yes.
so there's a bit of screening at the end. I think
Good.
it goes 1, 2, 3.
anything else? I'm prepared to answer questions or do whatever the board would like to do to move this thing forward.
Additional questions?
Very thorough job.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Two paper bills of full size. Perfect, thank you.
I planned actually on leaving one of these for your files, and we would take one.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Might as well.
So I don't think there are any other substantive things to talk about. I don't want to waste your time. I see you've got a full room here, so if there aren't any others, okay.
Graves will be back to.
Michael will be back at the next meeting.
Perfect, and to clean up the rest of the
Yes.
stuff over there. Perfect.
Yeah,
It was just a- Yeah, somewhat issue, right, that you guys deal with the.
There were maybe 6 or 7 issues that the peer reviewer brought up in the second peer review. We changed every single thing on the plan. Some of them were typos, names, what the purpose of the plan was. My understanding is he's satisfied with everything, except he hasn't weighed in again on that. We got a waiver, if you'll remember, on the definitive plan for having a little bit of a sag in the curve. Well, that low spot is now a stormwater. We're focused on the stormwater there. That seems to be the only issue. It's not insurmountable. It's a matter of us just getting with Mike Andretti and Jason Dubois, who's the abutter, and getting it straightened out. So when I'm done here today, I'm actually going to go meet Jason and show him the plans, and we're going to talk to him. And hopefully we've got this whole thing wrapped up by next Wednesday, when we come back.
And also, the only other comments we had were from the fire department. Those have also been addressed, which was changing the lock type on the front gate and adding in that bar gate.
Any other? Yeah. I'll open it up to abutters if you have comments or questions. He's happy.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing.
November
November
14th.
14th.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. All right.
Continue to
To next week? Okay, so do you want me to say something to Seth, or do you want to, I'll send him an email tomorrow?
Fine.
All right, and I'll copy you, and we'll get in that circle.
That's fine.
Terrific, thank you very much.
You're gonna leave a set?
I'm gonna leave a set, yeah, I'll do that.
Sorry.
You guys do your thing, I'll roll it up and I'll do it.
Should she bring it up, back your email?
And then I can make my statement.
Yeah.
Do I do You can't vote on anything important.
Ask questions though, right?
I said, that's what I said.
You can do it then. Go ahead.
Whatever you're. Okay. So as anyone with a proper Google search could figure out, I actually live on Old Worcester Road Extension. And although I'm more than 1,000 feet away, by state ethics violations, technically I don't qualify. However, the rule is actually that if you will be favorably or negatively affected in any way, you are to recuse yourself. So after listening last week to the traffic and how the traffic might back up onto the extension, how it might back up onto Old Worcester, how it might back up into the turn lane, I have decided that the best thing to do per state ethics is to publicly recuse myself from any and all further VGG discussions. So allow myself to go and sit in the audience with everybody else and to not be part of this. And actually find a seat around here. Is it closer than I thought? Yeah.
Excuse us, ma'am.
Oh, they weren't out there?
Attorney.
It's landed over there, some sign it, yeah.
No, this is, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, I'll tell you how much we're.
It's over there. I saw it walking. I can't go get the sign.
I'll get it.
I need to now sign it.
Is it-
I don't do it.
Is it
It's
out
over
there now?
I saw someone walk it over.
Sign-in sheets still going around? Has everybody signed in for? Well, you signed in?
They all thought they were coming for one another.
I think we'll let Dan, because he's made some changes, but then we'll discuss what they've done. And then we can do traffic director. After he's done, we can do that decision.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is for you before.
Yeah, the videos.
Very good, lawyer. I'm available as Plan B. Okay, thank you. I trust him to do his job for the board. But I'm there if
We
you
wanna,
need.
we have a seat for you, if you can sit wherever you.
to sip water during silence. There you go.
Being past 7:20, we'll open up, I'll open up the Valley Green Grow site plan application. And we'll let Dan present to us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having us back this evening. Again, my name is Dan Leary, Project Manager with Valley Green Grow. And I know there's a number of topics we wanted to hit tonight. And if I could just really quickly introduce some of the generally, we brought a team to help answer a lot of questions. Starting with, I think you remember Attorney Rosen, Michael Novak from Meridian Associates, our site civil, Rebecca Brown from GPI to discuss updated traffic, Michael Thornton with Vanderwild to discuss a number of utility-related things, and a team who Mike, RJ, Gary, and James from Liberty Utility to talk about natural gas. So we do hope we get the opportunity to discuss all these topics tonight. And if it would be acceptable, I did start off with an attempt to answer some questions from the last couple meetings, everything that we felt was unanswered or needed further clarification. And that is in a handout that was submitted to the town yesterday, so hopefully I think it's been up on the website, and we were just gonna, would it be all right if I ran through that in summary? So, and a lot of these are gonna be elaborated on as the evening goes through, so I won't get into it deeply right now. So the first was on the updated traffic study and the Route 20 access alternatives. And the highlight of that is we did do the updated study as requested. We met with the Mass Department of Transportation, and I think that's going to be one of the topics we'll discuss tonight. Second was questions about renderings from abutting properties. What's this going to look like? What are the cooling towers? What do they look like? How many towers are there? Those things. So what we did do is we put together a series of static renderings from each of the, I believe we have a packet of 8 of them. And I'll pass those out in a moment because I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to see them. But just kind of put one on each side, if that's all right. You'll be able to flip through those as we go, but we wanted to make sure that we looked at properties that were abutting mainly to the south, the east, and the west of the property. We did these renderings in a 3D program, so the facility, the grade, is very accurate, very accurate. What's not as accurate is the existing vegetation. It's hard to model what's exactly there. But one of the things that I really do want to note on that, and frankly I felt it was an oversight in our earlier submission, was about a buffer of trees, some very mature trees, beautiful 100-year-old white oak trees that buffer along the south side of the farm. And in an early submittal, we said that we'd be removing those trees and putting in some other transplants, and that kind of makes no sense at all. So we have proposed to keep those. So that's somewhat shown in these renderings. And more importantly is next week, when we're coming back with our sort of final submittal and updates, we'll be showing that buffer of trees on the site plan for approval. In addition to the static images, we also posted a couple of videos. One shows an overhead view of the facility. One shows a reasonably accurate view of someone driving down Old Worcester Road. They're 30-second videos. They're available on our website, and I believe the town has them as well. We learned a lot from this exercise because we found that there are actually some gaps where our existing landscape might not cover as well. So we have the opportunity to fix those you know, you can see the fence, but we think we can do more with landscaping in front of the fence and parts of the facility that show. Again, vggcharlton.com is the website where you can see those, or you can see them on the town's website. The next comment, ma'am, is was about decommissioning bond and suggestions about how we approach that. And I don't know if we have to get into it right now, but we provided a summary of what we think might be a reasonable approach to that. The next was questions about delivery vehicle details, and we wanted to elaborate on what, I think when I responded, I said there would be rock wool, fertilizers, spare parts, things like that. But we did want to put together a table that outlined what these deliveries would be, and we say up to 10 deliveries a day, but we think that that's very, very conservative, so we kind of looked at this from a weekly schedule based on the operation of the facility at its peak, and even in contingencies, you know, a truck of rock wool a week, for example, you see in this chart, it's not a DOT hazard. Fertilizer, one truck a week, that would be possibly a Class 8 depending on the fertilizers because it's a corrosive. Other expendables, when I said spare parts, I was thinking these are filters and irrigation lines, things that are not durable products in the operation. Cleaning supplies, food supplies, administrative supplies, and if necessary, and we hope it's not necessary, some temporary fuel to fill us in the interim. Next question had to do with water and the wastewater plan, including how's this rainwater reservoir system going to work. And I've attached to this packet the flow chart, which was briefed to the Water and Sewer Commission on Monday in reasonable detail. Again, it was more of an introduction to the project, to the Water Sewer Commission, to talk about the flow of that. And that might be a topic for tonight if we have the opportunity to get into it and talk about what how the water system works, water and sewer systems work. The next question was about blackout curtains, and you know, could we show some examples? So we've got a great contingent in the Netherlands that went out to a greenhouse and filmed them opening and closing and how they work. We stitched that together into a 1-minute video with some narration that's on the website, so you can see that these blackout curtains really do prevent any sort of light pollution during nighttime hours when we have to have the grow lights on. And hopefully everybody will see that they won't be subject to light pollution from the grow lights.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, ma'am.
That video rendition, is that what you'd expect the inside to look like? Just
Yes.
trying to get it, so that your setup is pretty similar to that on the inside.
It's nearly exactly like it. Our setup would have more grow lights in there, but it's just like that, and that there's plants and rock wool on the ground. There's irrigation systems that come out to it, and it operates the exact same way. It's the same greenhouse frame. Yeah. So the next question was regarding the proposed shifts and their impacts on school times. And as we went through the traffic study, we wanted to try and optimize shifts to, you know, reduce the overall impact of traffic. But I think one of the comments we heard is that might not be the right approach because sections along this road have, or where school buses come through at certain times of the day. We said, oh yeah, that, you know, the numbers work better in one way, but there might be a better impact on how we can reduce the impact for the schools in another way. So we would propose certainly to work with the planning board and come up with, if there's suggestions for a revised schedule, we'd be happy to do that. Next question was questions regarding the status of the natural gas interconnection. And as I mentioned, we have a team here from Liberty Utilities to talk through that, our current status and next steps this evening. Ma'am, the next question was locations of the utility feeders, and some of that's already been added to the plans. The rest of it will be added to the submission that'll be into your to the board by next week. Next question was about the MEPA process, and so Valley Green Grow is preparing the ENF, the environmental notification form. We've had the discussions with MEPA to understand what's the best way to navigate the process, and we're taking what we believe to be a very conservative process through MEPA. So those filings are being prepared right now. It's addressing, certainly for anyone not familiar with it, it's a state agency overview of a number of state agencies that are looking at compliance to traffic, wetlands, energy, air quality, water consumption, and land alteration, which are the primary 6 aspects of it. But it's a really, really in-depth sort of site plan process looking at those specific things. So that's underway. Next question is to confirm the intent for L. Turner Drive, and as we stated the last time, we agree that it would become the responsibility that VGG would presume all responsibility for maintaining L. Turner Drive.
And Bill, that would need to go to town meeting for.
Yes.
The approximate construction schedule, I just reiterated what I think I said in the last meeting. The site work portion taking about 3 to 4 months, time of year dependent, and that the facility, the construction of it would be staged over a 9 to 15 month period. It's not coming in on a single shipment and going up all at the same time. It gets staged. There was a couple of public comments that were passed up to us through the planning office. One of them was a good question about the finish of the greenhouse, and that there might have been an inconsistency in one of the drawings. And I think, in looking at it, there might have been just a misunderstanding about the finish of the head house, which is a metal clad building that was in the elevation drawing. It looked like it might have been the greenhouse, but it's actually adjacent to the greenhouse. So to confirm, the head house facility is, the processing facility is a metal clad building. The greenhouses are glass greenhouses. The top 2/3, and then several feet above that are is actual clear glazing. The bottom third of the walls are opaque insulation panel material. The next question that came in was related to the traffic study. It was an excellent question about the intersection of Old Worcester Road and Prenier Roads, and was it studied? Is there anything that we could possibly do to help improve that intersection? And I think when we talk about traffic tonight, we'd like to see if we can offer anything. Finally was a comment that was an excellent one raised by the building commissioner, is that while we've been stating that we're within the compliance of the 25% lot coverage, that the actual drawings were slightly over by 20,000 feet or so. So we removed that from the drawings, and those that'll be updated on the set of plans that you'll have delivered next week. That was the high level. I'm not sure if there's a right time or place to talk about the renderings, or how would you like to proceed, ma'am?
Well, I think, yeah, if you could give an explanation of what you've come up with and what you think it means, that would be helpful to people in the audience.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
I'm very sorry we don't have any audio visuals that everybody can see. But this is all available on our website and the town's website. And I'll just pass around my copy as we go through them. But I'll just say what we sought to do was to hit abutting properties rendered from ground level. If you're standing in your backyard or if you're standing in your front yard, if you're across the street, what are you going to see when you look up at this facility? These trees that are in the front are intended to be these beautiful 70-foot, it's basically a buffer of hardwood, white oak that are in there, and there's about another 20-foot buffer behind that of mostly pines that have been growing up over the last 20 years or so. So as that starts to fill in, we believe that this view will be more screened from that natural vegetation. So these renderings aren't exactly accurate with the vegetation, but the facility and the grading is exactly what we've put in these site plans. I'm just going to pass these around for folks that maybe haven't seen them. Okay. All right, fair enough. So again, we went from the southwest side of the property, looked at 8 different properties as we got up to ones that were almost directly east of it. And again, what we learned is that the cooling tower is something that's a little bit too much in plain sight for an immediate abutter. And we've got to do some better landscape screening right there. And we learned that certainly the fence is visible and the fence can be screened with landscaping. It's only a 6-foot tall fence. But we also learned that right across the street on the very south side of the property, there was a spot where the greenhouses actually do come up a little bit too much into view. So that's an area that we're working on addressing. That's the 6 o'clock position of the facility. And that's an area that we believe we can address with vegetation, with additional plantings.
Will those be on the next set of plans that we get?
Yes.
Additional screenings on?
We'll go through the whole presentation, so we want to do this. Makes sense.
I think maybe we could take questions on what Dan has presented, but Matt County Traffic will save that for later.
Yeah, it's going to be too hard to do.
Right,
the
go back
demo.
to things, right?
Do you guys have questions? Do you have questions, Dan?
No, not really.
How tall is the fence?
6-foot tall fence, ma'am, and it's, for security, we have a strand of barbed wire across the top.
The barbed wire's beyond the 6 foot?
Yes, ma'am.
It's on top of the fence, right?
I was in prison all day today, so I know exactly what it's like.
Through the chair, I have one question. So looking at these renderings, on the most eastern side, there's a green dot. And I'm assuming all these renderings came from where the green dot was.
Yes.
I don't see a rendering on that lot that's due east of there. I do see a green dot, but there are no rendering pictures for that. Is there a reason?
Probably my collation abilities.
No, I looked through them all. I wasn't sure if one was left out for a specific reason.
Oh, I'm sorry, western.
Yeah, sorry, western. I said eastern. I'm sorry, yeah, western. The westernmost.
Right in.
Okay, I don't have that one. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's collation.
Okay, thank you. I got it. Okay, thank you. Look like the closest house to the facility.
What, just a question, what are you proposing for shading on the cooling tower? I know you said you're gonna have to add stuff, obviously, but what are you, for species, I guess, or in general? What's your thoughts or ideas? Sorry.
So we're gonna ask Michael Novak
Yeah.
from Meridian to.
Yep.
Well, now, So I know that the board has a, kind of a list of plants that they like. We've tried to stay within those. On our landscaping plan, no, I'm not a landscape architect, so bear with me, but my office does have the landscape architect that produced this plan. And we can certainly stick with what we've already come up with in terms of trees and shrubs, probably trees, since we're talking about the cooling tower. But we've got red maple and river birch, eastern red cedar, some Colorado spruce, and so on. Probably we would go with more of an evergreen.
Yeah.
Keep it screened most of the time, but we usually she likes to kind of intertwine a little bit of more of the deciduous as well. So, but we'll stick to the native list. That's the planning board.
Gotcha. Will the height be good enough though to cover that?
Well, that's what we got to figure
Okay,
out.
gotcha.
We got to coordinate with them if what kind of height we want to bring in. You know, we play the game on. I'll put my landscape architect hat on for a second. There's a trade-off between getting the bigger trees that tend to take longer to root and to stay alive versus getting some smaller trees that in 2 years' time are the same size but are a healthier tree.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a balancing act.
Okay.
But we can,
All right.
maybe we can talk about that in terms of when we bring the next plan. I'll bring a concept that we can talk about.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Do you want to open up the questions?
Review on trash. Anything new that's coming as far as traffic?
Do we want to, we're just talking about what's the most efficient way. Do we
Right.
want to open it up to questions?
I think we could take comments on the stuff that Dan has presented so far.
So I'm gonna open this up to questions, but we need to keep it, we're gonna get through every other section. We're gonna keep the questions very specific to what we just heard. And we're keeping all comments, questions, to 3 minutes. So,
So my question, how many acres of landscaping and slope do you guys plan on maintaining on a regular basis?
How many acres of landscape is to be maintained? Is that the question?
The question is that, I mean, I'm looking at the plans, and the building is basically surrounded by very steep slopes. The renderings, I saw the video, and it shows, you know, everything lush with green grass that's freshly mowed, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering, I mean, how many acres of maintenance is this place gonna require? So, I mean, it looks like a pretty daunting task to me, but I just figured I would ask that question. You know, how many acres? I mean, is it 1 acre, 10 acres? What? Because it looks like I said, it looks like it's a big task.
Well, I'm sure I could say it's more than 1 acre, but I don't have the exact amount. But I can give an idea of how the landscape plan works. Again, I think at the next meeting, I'll have my landscape architect with us. I think that probably would make sense since we're gonna give you some new stuff. The internal landscaping inside the fence is a manicured lawn. I'm sure will be landscaped on a regular basis. Dan can probably talk to the frequency as to what they would like to have people know. Outside of the fence, the idea around the slope is a meadow type of grass. Excuse me, think of the very thick rough on a golf course. You know, it's maybe maintained once or twice a year. It doesn't grow a ton, it's thick, it's there to hold the slope. So the idea is to maintain that existing look as we look up the slope now, but then when we're on top of the plateau, it's more of a manicure. So I can give you the areas at the next meeting. I can't do them on the plans that I have, but that's the idea of the overall approach of the landscape.
On the renderings that, the video cartoonish renderings that I saw, which I think are the screen prints that were just passed around, I noticed that Orchard Way and the big massive retaining wall are completely not in the rendering. It just shows the grass hill and then the structure on top, but the actual subdivision that you guys are proposing is completely not shown. There's a cul-de-sac in the drawing, and there's a huge retaining wall, you know?
Right.
Just curious which rendering had that.
I'm sorry, the subdivision plan's not rendered into this plan, it's a different site plan review.
Sure.
I want to hold off on that. I mean, it's gonna all be one project. Do we want to answer that? Hold off on that.
We've got
Separate.
Yeah, we've got the
Separate item.
subdivision
Because we
review
don't,
next week,
we
so.
really don't see it.
But what's the point of a rendering if it doesn't actually show reality?
We'll make sure that we get renderings for the submission also, so
There's
we can
another
see.
component that's missing. In the land of power plants, there's cooling towers, but there's also exhaust stacks. There is no exhaust stack in any of the renderings. I don't believe there's any cooling tower showing either. Those are things that are usually visible pretty far away. Are those included in the rendering?
There are cooling towers.
How about the exhaust stack?
Is there an exhaust stack in the village? The generator?
Yeah, you can, so the rendering didn't necessarily have all the details, but this might be a good time for Mike Thornton from Vanderwild to describe it.
I'm Mike Thornton from Vanderwild, the MEP engineer record. Right now, the architect is looking at the location of the fuel burning equipment. So those stacks would be roughly 12 feet above the top of the greenhouse, and that's set back from the edge of the greenhouse. Basically.
How tall are those?
12 feet above the height of the greenhouse.
Roughly 12 feet above the top of the greenhouse.
And
And they're roughly about 18 inches diameter. It's four. Typically what you see on top of a building that would have boilers in it.
Can we get the renderings updated to reflect that so we can get a more accurate
Yes, ma'am.
picture of what we're
So the top of the greenhouse elevation is what? Is it 22 feet? Because 12 plus 22 would be over the max 36, no? Or would it be 34? What is the actual max elevation on top of those cooling towers? You
so
have a building height max, I was just curious if it's above it.
the cooling tower heights are 25 feet as shown. And as described, the greenhouse's max height at the top of the ridge is approximately 26 feet.
So 26 plus 12 is not what you just said.
Yeah, exhaust stacks are exempt from the zoning. For building height, it's not part of the building, it's a mechanical ancillary piece of equipment, so
Is that correct?
it's not. Not a building structure.
So are those stacks shown on the site plan? Do you have those located now, or? I don't see any exhaust.
There, so the cogeneration building, sir, is right in here.
Okay.
So these stacks, and
be
Mike,
on the roof of
would
that.
you like to show
Sure.
the approximate location based on, you know, the cogeneration facility here? Would they be at the edge of the building?
So they would be in the, right along that line.
So it's not clear to me how far away from the building you'd have to be in order to see them, but that we can render. You might need to be in the air to see them, I guess is my point. So,
You said they're gonna be 12 feet above the greenhouse?
That would be the.
38 feet?
Yes, ma'am, that's what
No,
he said.
Closer.
The peak of the greenhouse or the roof of the cogeneration?
Be it from the roof of the cogeneration. Right.
I'm sorry, to clarify, it's likely 12 feet above the eave of the greenhouse, based on, as drawn. So the roof of the cogen is slightly lower. So the roof of the cogen's at the eave height. I just open up the elevation drawing, which is not part of that set. So it'd be, it's approximately 6 feet above the highest part of the greenhouse, based on a 12-foot stack.
So the roofs aren't just flat. It's 12 feet. 6 feet over the highest greenhouse.
Right?
You're getting a different answer here, because he said 6 feet,
Well,
and
they
he
could
said
do
12
the
feet.
math.
I can clarify if
Yeah,
there's more.
go ahead.
So,
please.
so the eave height of the greenhouse, so the question is how high above the green, so the eave height of the greenhouse is 21 feet, is the eave height. The ridge height is approximately 26 feet. So where my math was wrong off the cuff, it's 21 feet plus 12, so it's 33 feet height above grade, be the top of the
Stacks.
stacks.
Hi, this relates.
I just need, would you just state your name and
My name is
address?
Bob Sargis, 97 Carroll Hill Road. I have some environmental background from ways ago. I did some air pollution modeling back in the 90s, but has anyone approached the Mass DEP regarding permits for this cogeneration facility? Is it still proposed at, is it 16 megawatts, 14 megawatts? 18 megawatts, is that still the number? Because anything over 50 kilowatts needs to be brought up to Mass DEP for their review. And this is 360 times bigger than that. Has any modeling been done about the air quality emissions for carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxides? And typically,
Did you address that, or would you address it in your?
Can I address it just in very
I want to
high
make sure
summary?
that the, you know, what we try to
Just
keep the
staying on
questions in the.
subject, yeah.
In summary, that's not typically done at this part of the project. Yes, there's a process to bring this before DEP to obtain this, the permitting. And Mike Thornton can speak to that process. It takes many months to get those air quality permits approved with DEP.
Is it no or yes?
So, Dan, would you like
All
to
right,
answer that?
we just gotta keep, we gotta keep everything very, very civil.
So this is part of the ordinary and customary permitting process. I'm sure your council could confirm that. We will go through a NEPA process, which looks at air quality, and we will go to DEP as part of the process. We fully expect these will be conditions of the approval. But yes, our team is looking at this. And, you know, we also point out, as we've explained previously, you know, part of the project is to take the carbon monoxide and feed it back into the greenhouses. Carbon dioxide. So the whole process will be engineered and will have to go as part of the NEPA process and to the DEP.
there still needs to be modeling for carbon monoxide, which is different than carbon dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. Possibly, if you have a certain threshold of tonnage of emittance, like if you meet the 50 ton per year criteria of nitrogen oxides emissions, that triggers an EPA new source review, which you're probably familiar with that, for the Title V Clean Air Act of 1990.
So it's a pretty standard process you go through in permitting these units. They're all under 10 megawatts. The facility is under 25 megawatts. So you're right, at every different level, there's a threshold and permitting requirements for that. It's a pretty standard process. So we'll go through that application. It'll be a state permit, right? And it'll be for each engine. That's a 6-month process for each engine under 10 megawatts. And they're all under that. They're all less than half of that. So we'll go through that process. There'll be back-end emissions treatment for this that reduces carbon monoxide and converts it to CO2. And that's all part of the best available control technologies that the Mass DEP regulates the EPA regulations. So it's not the EPA, but it's the DEP that administers the EPA policies, and we have to follow those best available control technologies, and that will be part of the whole process.
Alicia G, 18 Old Worcester Road Extension. Knowing we only have 2 meetings left, at what point should we expect to have full-size renderings so that we can see every part of this process, so that we can ask you questions while we're here? With the exhaust towers, the cooling towers, the trees that you're going to use, so that we as the abutters can actually see what it looks like standing on the ground.
The landscaping plans will be presented for the next meeting that show the details. To put all that in, there's additional detail that we can put into the animations. Our attempt with the animations was to show the most important areas, I think, and what it's going to look like, but it's nearly impossible to get each planting that we're going to put in there on the animation. I can't promise that we can do all that. We can put the stack in there, but I think that what we have to do is rely on putting the plantings and the screenings into the landscape plan of the plans. And you know, I just don't know that there's going to be a lot more that we can do on the renderings.
I'm more interested in size, so if the exhaust tower is this big, I need to know whether the tree is going to be this big or this big. I'm less interested in the type of shrubbery. I know that there's an approved list, so we all recognize that it'll be one of those. We trust that that will happen, and I don't mean to imply otherwise. But just so we can see, as an abutter, as someone who hasn't had a chance to look at the website thoroughly, where these exhaust towers are sitting, where the cooling towers are sitting, where the greenhouses are sitting, so that while you're here, we can ask questions and feel justified that while we're standing on the ground, we look up and know exactly what we're looking at. And see it, I appreciate the handouts, but I'd like something bigger so that I can actually see it from where I sit, as I haven't had a chance to grab a handout yet.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So the, we need to put some poster boards, bring poster boards next time that show these renderings. We'll make sure we have the exhaust. I'm confused, ma'am, I'm sorry.
What are you going to have the
part of
final?
the plan, Bill?
When are you going to have the final plans?
Yes.
Prepared?
Next week, next
Yes,
meeting?
yes, they'll be submitted for the 14th.
And will these other renderings be part of that plan?
I don't
That's
anticipate having other, I anticipate coming back with the same renderings, the colored renderings, just adding the stacks, and if there's significant vegetation, especially around the cooling towers, we can add that in to show what's an example there. Maybe that sounds like that's what's needed.
We make our solar applicants do the same thing. They literally stand in everybody's yard and what they're gonna see visually. So if I was in a butter, I'd wanna say if I'm standing in my front yard, backyard, whatever I'm facing, that I wanna see what I'm gonna look like, what I'm gonna be seeing every day. That's so something like that.
So I guess I'm confused because I think that's what we brought in. It's just missing some of the detail of the stacks. But, yeah, I'm sorry.
Make it a little bigger and prettier, add more
Bigger.
details, add your stacks.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Will do.
So another question is the homes along, I guess, the eastern side of Old Worcester Road are a higher level than the road. So their sightings from the building are gonna be a lot worse than what your renderings show here. So we need something from where those homeowners are, what they're gonna see.
So there's the abutting properties.
So the
We took
abutting
the actual
properties-
elevation.
Sure.
So we took the elevation from the backyard.
From the backyard of the abutting properties on the western
east.
side.
And the east.
And the east of, I'm talking about Old Worcester Road. These are direct abutters. I'm talking about the houses on the other side of the road from the facility. They sit up higher than the road. They sit up higher than the abutters. So their view is gonna be a lot higher, and I'd like to see what they're gonna, like to see.
Okay. So the east side of Old Worcester Road.
The eastern side of Old Worcester Road.
Looking through the houses and.
Looking
through
above the houses, they're actually looking above the
Some
houses.
of them are pretty high up there, so.
Okay. I'll be more closer to the level that the facilities are.
Sir, for clarity,
Sure.
can you just put a couple of dots on there so I can?
So I'm talking about the houses on this side of the road here.
Right there, okay.
These are all up on a hill.
Understood. Thank you, Dan.
Hi, Andrea Lockwood, 59 Old Worcester Road. I'm at the 6 o'clock point. My living space is, I have a 2-story. I want to know what I'm going to see from my bedrooms upstairs.
Just what we asked for.
Yep.
Okay.
Just from a timing perspective, we will get as much as we can for the next meeting. It's gonna depend what we flew and what we have of the ability to model. So those things we will be able to get done. We should be able to get done by next week's meeting. But to the extent that we have to go out and do any additional field work, we will try and fill in the holes, but that may take more than next. But we will get you whatever we have prepared by next week so you can see. And then if we may, I just wanted to make the board aware that there was a chance that we would need to submit something after the next meeting.
Hi, Rick Rowe, 11 Pernia Road. The elevation of our house is about the same as the apple orchard by the time they take the top off. I want to know what kind of screening and trees or whatever will be provided.
We'll get that, that's exactly what we're asking for.
Because we're way up there.
In-
We're at like the top of Beacon Hill.
Is that where you?
Yeah,
Yes,
going
we're-
up that way towards Purdue, sure.
Right on the top road.
Swimming on that side.
Compare an elevation on the map.
It's over here. It's on this side.
That's what we already.
Yeah, and
So we
Don circled it for
That's
us.
what Mr. Clay circled, yeah.
So, yeah, so Don already circled that whole section, so
that was
we'll
the
have a
section that
good
we wanted to get.
rendering of what, you'll be.
I just seek clarification on the earlier conversation about the 33-foot height there. So there are two, in my experience, there are two tall things on power plants, and so this is specifically for Liberty and Vanderwaal. When you say that these things are gonna be 33 feet tall, max height, and that they're not part of the building structure, I get that, it's like a chimney basically. What I'm gonna ask is are you referring to the exhaust stack, or are you referring to the cooling towers? What is 33 feet? Which component?
I thought your question was about the exhaust or, the engines or the boiler,
Well, there's two things. There's cooling towers that are gonna let go
The
excess steam.
cooling towers are across the road, and the exhaust stacks are on the cogen building, which is part of the greenhouse block of buildings. So that's inset from that wall.
So without any picture, I'm trying to mentally come up with this, because we don't have a rendering, right? So
Are you talking about the cooling tower or the exhaust
I'm
stack?
asking you to tell me the height and the number of the cooling towers. How many, are we 5 cooling towers, 6, how many?
I'm sorry, so for the cooling tower,
Yep.
I think we gave you that one.
Yeah.
It's 22 feet, right?
So, Madam Chairman, the cooling tower is rendered in these drawings, and I realize maybe the confusion is some of it's covered by trees in the renderings, because we're trying to take perspectives. Probably the best way to see the cooling tower, there's a animation called Flyover that's on the website, and the town has it, and that's where we start from the north of the facility, from a bird's eye view and come around, and that's where you can see the scale of the cooling tower. And
When you say tower, you're saying singular, there's one cooling tower?
So the cooling tower is one tower, and it has multiple fans on it.
Ah, okay.
So-
And so the fans are elevated on the top of the building?
No, so the cooling tower is not part of the building.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I confused you by talking about the exhaust stacks, but the exhaust stacks for the engines are like exhaust stacks you'd see on the top of a high school for the high school boiler, right, or a chimney on your house. They're very, they're 18 inches diameter, and they're that for the fuel burning equipment. The cooling towers It's just a piece of equipment that sits on the ground all by itself, not part of the main building.
It's
And
not
that's
part of the
only
main-
22 feet high.
I'm sorry.
22 feet, 22 feet from grade.
From
And I think that's all mostly screened by trees except for the ones you wanted to have.
Thank you.
This is a
That's the cool tower. And there's the stacks, they talk about this 418. Stacks is 418 inches.
Which would be,
Oh, I see. Okay.
so that those would be individuals, it'd be like your chimney stack on your house.
You can take this, but that's the perspective looking from right
That's
in this
this.
person's backyard.
Not this. This
Nope.
is this.
That green, that's a single cooling tower unit with fans on the top, that's
Okay, and this thing
looking
is
from right
20
here.
something feet
25 feet tall,
25
max.
feet tall. But where is the stack here? The exhaust fan, right, exhaust, the.
On top of the coach's building.
On top of this building?
Yeah, on
Okay,
top of this.
thank you, that's it, thank you. Thank you.
just to get the answer. Yes, sir.
I just have one more question. You said there may be more than one engine. These are reciprocating engines, right, that are the cogeneration, burning the natural gas. Do you know how many units there will be to create 18 megawatts?
Right now, this is the one.
4? Thank you.
Over here. Hi. A couple of questions.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Dave Walkwood, 69 Old Worcester Road. I'm looking at the property. I'm wondering if it's possible, if I'm not mistaken, there is an access or security road around this entire property with light standards of 25 feet? Yes? No? Right? Is it possible to get the rendering at night? Because the people on the south side are going to be looking up. However much you cut off the top of the hill, if it comes to be, you're going to see that. You're going to see these light standards. No amount of baffles or boxes are going to diminish that. And I know you
We're
can
going
model.
to,
You can model the.
Sir, we'll be actually covering that with, under community impact, the next meeting, the lights. So they'll be all prepared to, and if you could bring us rendering so we know what it looks like at night, that would be perfect.
Can I have a cooling tower question?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't know if any consideration's been made to taking a baseline sound reading of the property line for comparison's sake for when these things are in full operation along with the generators.
We are on that, we have a sound engineer, and
14.
and on the 14th, we will address that.
Outstanding.
Be prepared for the 14th.
This is a cooling tower question.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Brett Moore, 15 Hammer Road. How many tons are these towers?
Right now, it's shown as 10,000 tons.
10,000 tons. And you're saying those discharge chutes are only 18 inches?
No, that's,
That
I'm
misunderstood.
sorry, that's where I misunderstood her question. The coolant, the diameter of those fans, I think it was 12 feet 12 feet around.
And how many of those fans are there?
We had 6 on there.
So 6 fans that are 12 foot tall, 12 foot in diameter.
No, not 12 foot tall. I think they're 6 feet. The fan stack that sits on top of the tower is 6 feet.
6 feet.
And 12 foot diameter.
And are these towers going to be chemically treated?
Typically, they're treated with some sort of biocide to prevent Legionnaires and things like that.
Right. And that
Quebec code
biocide is
to
usually
meet-
caustic, correct? Only because I do it for a living.
It's depending on what you use, whether you use a brominate or a phosphate or sodium hypochlorite.
And how many of the pounds of that, if we calculated, is going to, first of all...
I wouldn't have that information.
Okay,
for
because it's
treatment.
going to go into the atmosphere and it's going to drop down on our school. And I just am curious if we're looking into that at all.
That is
Part of-
beyond me, so I don't even know how to answer that, Bill. Do we have anybody that's gonna have any clue about this stuff?
So part of the DEP process is to look at particulate matter from cooling towers, so that's addressed in the permitting process.
And I just have one, have we looked at this for having these, industrial size cooling fans in other residential areas around the state? Have we looked into that at all? Yeah. And the chemicals and I mean, it's an issue.
We haven't, under community impact, look a little closer, but I would doubt that there's many things like this in residential,
Go
in
figure.
agricultural areas.
Actually, they are used in residential areas in suburban but predominantly urban areas. They're on top of every building. They use them for cooling the building.
Makes it a little
This
different than
size?
having it.
Yes.
Those are pretty big. I mean, not in Worcester, not in Charlotte.
Not in Charlotte.
Not in Worcester either. Maybe a few in Boston, but I
Thank
would
you.
doubt it.
Mass Power Plant. Any other questions?
Hi, Ken Howard, 181 Ulster Road. I've got to ask this. If not for this project, for other projects that come before the town in years to come, shouldn't all this stuff be figured out before you guys are given your 90 days to decide? Because we're going to be right down to the wire here. When do you have to decide? December 4th?
Yeah.
And there's so many unknowns, so many things that are up in the air. This is ridiculous. I mean, all this stuff should be done, and then you guys have your 90 days to decide and look into it and research it. I mean, it's not fair to you guys or to the townspeople to be put under the gun like this. You're gonna be deciding on something, and there's still gonna be stuff up in the air. We're still not gonna have renderings. It's crazy.
Thank you.
I just gotta say that.
Just one more, is there any way you can, any screening modeling that could be done before the next meeting to get just a general idea of levels of NOx and CO in PM10 or particulate matter? Or is that going to be incorporated? I know it's going to be incorporated into your detailed modeling. It's going to take months, but we're never going to know before the next meeting or before the decision time what the impacts of all this air pollution is going to be. 18 megawatts is an industrial sized, bigger than an industrial sized generator. It can power a lot of stuff. That's my concern. And we're not going to know what air quality is going to be until they complete the modeling. Could be next year before that happens. Thank you.
Hi, 90 Old Worcester Road. I just want to say that our neighborhood has suffered greatly with the pollution that we've had in our wells. And to bring on all of this other stuff now through the air, it just makes it even more difficult to accept because we have all had such issues with our wells. Is there any way that, I just wish this whole thing would stop and it would move on someplace else because our neighborhood has suffered enough. And now we're gonna have these trucks that are gonna be coming down our roads that are gonna vibrate our roads and crack our
I'll stop you right there. And
Yep,
can tell you,
I understand.
The reason why this is coming in is because your board of selectmen voted to bring it in, so you should go right to their meetings and ask them the same exact question.
I will. I'm just concerned for our health because there have been a lot of people in our neighborhood that have become sick because of what happened with the wells. And now we have to worry about these towers and what they're gonna be spewing into the air that's gonna be, you know, blown across the schools and blown across the rest of us. It's just, you know, there just doesn't seem to be any certainty that we are gonna be safe.
Betsy, we should move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, a question regarding the power plant. Trying to understand how this is going to work. If the company is allowed to tap into this high-pressure gas line, what happens next? On the plans, there's a conditioning building, there's a metering building. It mentions compressed natural gas. Can you help me understand the high-pressure natural gas pipeline, tapping into it, the metering, the compressed natural gas? How much energy will the plant, the facility use? Will the power plant be producing more power than is needed by the facility? And if so, what's going to happen to that surplus power? Will it be put back into the grid? Will the gas be sold at a different time? And will the gas be sold to third parties off-site? If somebody could walk through that process to help folks in this room understand.
So if just, you were taking things sequentially, we were at a particular topic, and we have
people here to discuss gas and utilities this evening, but before we do, I want to make sure that you're done with the prior topic and the board is ready for us to move on to the next topic. And then I think the best thing we can do is, rather than starting to answer questions on the topic, is we could talk to the board and the citizens generally about the topic, and then you could open it back up to questions like you have on the last couple of items.
So we've been kind of on the subject of this power plant, and that a power plant question, then we'll move on to water, sewer,
The cogen is-
traffic, and then water and sewer. So is there, am I?
So do you want us to have them present now and
Do
explain?
we want to discuss? So that will be, when they present, we'll open that.
Well, Madam Chairman, I understand. Since we were on the topic
I
of the
thought so.
plant, that's why I thought the question was appropriate at that time. But if they want to make a presentation and that would answer my questions, then that would be great.
Perfect, thank you.
Madam Chair, the meeting that we've got scheduled tonight is for the traffic study, water, sewer, fire, and police. Cogen is actually scheduled for next meeting. It would be good to at least get back to the traffic study now. We've kind of circled around to the renderings and kind of get back on.
And it's a little bit confusing because we think of utilities, we think of the cogen, and it kind of got stuck in this
Well, so
place.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Russell, your questions are really about access to utilities, not about the cogen plant.
My question is about the process, as I said, for the production of the power and how that's going to work. And we were told that the meeting tonight was on utilities, so I thought that they were appropriate questions.
And I might have misunderstood, ma'am, because I thought we were talking about a bit of the cogen for this meeting, but might make sense to go through this logically is to talk briefly about what the cogen's doing, because then that ties back into the natural gas interconnection point that Liberty Utilities can discuss, and then maybe get into water from there and continue with the utilities if that'd be acceptable.
Do we want to do traffic first? You want to do traffic first? I know there's someone likes to stay in our meetings for a long time.
So do you want to hear from me, or do you want to hear from Rebecca about the revised study?
Let the applicant present, and then.
So, just to keep things kind of brief, to let everyone kind of talk about all the different topics tonight, I'm just really going to go over the things that have changed since the last meeting, so I don't want to kind of rehash everything. But the few things that I want to touch on tonight are kind of our coordination with Mass DOT, the Prenier Road intersection that we were asked to take a look at, the changes we made to the trip distribution, the sight lines at the side driveway, and kind of the results of the analysis that we had in the traffic study. So just to kind of touch briefly on our coordination with Mass DOT, we did have a meeting with them last Monday, October 29th, to discuss options for having access out onto Route 20. What we heard from them, and just want to kind of point on a map so you can see where we're looking to have the access. So here's where the site is located, Route 20 here. This area here is where the proposed cultivation center is. So where we were looking to potentially create an access would be right about in this location here, which is a little bit to the east of that, the U-turn movement, the unsignalized U-turn.
Rebecca, before you explain, can you just turn the board and show the rest of the room that point?
That works too.
Be all right.
Yeah, so the area where we're looking to do it is right in this area here, just to the east of that unsignalized U-turn. So that was the area that we had proposed to MassDOT to provide an access, which would be a right-in, right-out because of the median divided access in that location. However, with U-turns allowed at either end of the driveway, people would still be able to make left turns via the U-turn movements. the guidance that we got from them is that they strongly prefer not having access directly out onto Route 20 for a number of reasons. One, obviously, that location is on a pretty steep grade as you're coming up the hill. It's also on a curve, so sight lines are a little bit tough in that area. And with the additional grading component, cars are going pretty fast. With the unsignalized U-turn, they were a little bit concerned about the volume of cars as well as the number of trucks that would be making U-turns at an unsignalized location. So their preference was really for us to have access out onto Old Worcester Road and utilize the traffic signal at Old Worcester Road to gain access onto Route 20. Based on that, we continued with the traffic study, assuming that we would have access directly on Old Worcester Road via the El Turner Drive connection as we had previously. We did hear a lot of comments at the last meeting from people that thought that we would have a lot more traffic coming from local roadways, which made a lot of sense based on the communities where a lot of the employees would likely live. So we made a lot of changes to the trip distribution, which kind of changed. You can see on the revised map here where traffic would be coming from. So we have about 20% of traffic using Morton Station Road and North Main Street to get into the site. Also about 20% on Route 20 from this direction. And then about 10% coming down Center Depot Road and Carroll Hill Road, which previously we didn't have any traffic on Carroll Hill Road. So when we look closer, the comment was good that people had that people could be using that as well to get into the site. This resulted in approximately 9 to 34 vehicles per hour on any of the study area roadways during the peak hour, which is roughly one additional vehicle every 2 to 7 minutes that would be traveling through any of those study area roadways outside of that study area. The other thing that we did look at was the Prenier Road intersection that is, it's a little bit hidden by this label, but it's right here. There was a concern for crashes at that location and that lighting might be an issue. It is relatively dark because of vegetation that's overgrown, so certainly cutting back some of that vegetation could help to light the intersection a little bit better and also improve the sight lines as you're coming around that corner. We did put the reported crashes from Mass DOT. We had to go all the way back to 2010 before we actually found one that was reported, which was one that had occurred in inclement weather conditions with a vehicle that ran off the road. We did note that there was a handful that had occurred in 2008 and 2009, and it was mentioned that that light was out for a while, so we didn't know if that coincided with the time that the signal, that the light might have been broken at that intersection, because there was all of a sudden a cluster in those 2 years and then died off again. But really some clearing of that vegetation could help a lot to improve sight lines as you're traveling through that intersection, as well as some of the lighting in that area as well. We also have prepared a sightline diagram, which I think is actually on the back side of the one you have. So this was at the request for the peer review to show this is El Turner Drive here and Old Worcester Road along this curvature here. And this is a point of view for a vehicle who is exiting El Turner Drive, looking at, in this example, to the west towards oncoming traffic. And it's a little difficult to see the line, but this dashed line is essentially the sight line for that driver that's looking in that direction. This area in here is the area that we're talking about that would need to be regraded in order to get that sight line to be the 230 feet that was required to meet the intersection sight distance for the posted speed, or excuse me, the 85th percentile speed. And then I'm just going to flip this one real quick so that you can see the other direction. So this is looking in the other direction towards Morton Station Road. So this area that is to the south of this dashed line here similarly represents the area that would need to be regraded in order to get that 230-foot sight distance for the 33 miles per hour. You can see that that does extend about to the Morton Station Road, which should significantly help the sight line as you're approaching Morton Station Road as well, to improve the safety of that intersection as well. And this diagram down at the bottom just shows you what the sight line looks like today and the area that would be removed and taken down for that sight line to be improved. So site plans are going to need to be modified to show this area being regraded for that sight line. So the last component that I kind of wanted to touch on was the results of the analysis, which were substantially similar to what we had shown in the previous traffic study. Again, at the Old Worcester Road intersection with Route 20, we were seeing the backups during the Saturday for that westbound left turn movement, which are occurring today. We had made recommendations to DOT when we met with them that that intersection needs to be retimed because of the backup that's occurring there for that westbound left turn. They appear to be amenable to making some changes, and in fact, we're looking to take a look at that intersection prior to this project moving forward to see what can be done there. At the intersection of North Main Street and Center Depot Road, there was also during the PM peak hour, because of the changes in trip distribution that we've had, there was a level of service F that was popping up at that intersection for the westbound left turn as well. And that was for the PM condition. So we're looking to make some minor modifications to signal timings at that intersection as well to improve the operations of that intersection. Overall, at each of the study area intersections, there was a maximum of a 5-second increase in delay as a result of the project with those signal timing modifications in place, and a maximum of a 3-vehicle increase in the queue at any of the study area intersections. For all of the unsignalized intersections on Old Worcester Road, we were seeing levels of service of B or better at the Morton Station Road and the site driveway intersections. So not much has changed from the original study as far as the operations go. But that's kind of where we're at this point with the traffic study. If there are specific questions, we can certainly answer those. I know there was one other question that was brought up at the last meeting in regards to how the trip generation was done, and I just wanted to clarify that real quickly. I know it was brought up that we had used Land Use Code 140 was included in our in the tables in the traffic study, and I just wanted to clarify to make sure that people understand that we provided data for ITE for Land Use Code 140 for comparison purposes, so that you could see what would be generated if we had used an ITE land use code. But the actual trip generation was based on empirical data from number of employees that we anticipate having and when those shift changes would actually occur and what the maximum number of people changing over in one shift would be. In regards to using the Land Use Code 140, it was brought up that we didn't use the right amount of square footage. We actually used number of employees. So when you're looking at ITE data, there are multiple variables that you could look at to estimate your trip generation. One of those is square footage. Another one of those is employees, the number of employees that you anticipate having. Where this use is such a unique use and isn't exactly a manufacturing type use because of the large greenhouse component, we didn't feel it was appropriate to use square footage because a lot of the space within the building isn't actually being used for manufacturing. It's for the cogeneration plant, it's for the food service, it's for the greenhouse component. So we thought the most comparable element was the number of employees. And that's why we used the number of employees when we were calculating the trip generation based on the ITE land use codes. So we used the 300 employees that are proposed and compared that to the empirical data that we had. And for some of the time periods, they were actually pretty close once we revised the shift changes and all of the new information. But overall, the empirical data was still higher for all but the morning peak. So we had used that to provide the most conservative estimate of the trip generation. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that so that people were aware of what we had done and why we had done it that way.
Have you, did you do any research to see how other facilities calculated? I mean, I just looked at a couple and it looked like they took the whole entire square footage, even the growing space. Obviously, they were much smaller facilities. I just wanna make sure that we're really looking at accurate numbers. So, I forget which one I was looking at. Right, when another facility, and I was looking, and it used that 140 number, but it was the whole entire square footage of the whole entire building, and so, and it's not that way because you're saying that it's pretty much all greenhouse, but aren't there still people that are picking and?
Yeah, so in those examples, they're using the square footage of the whole building. What we're using is the employees that would be employed in the entire building, in the entire facility. So it's still basically considering the entirety of the project. We're not leaving some component out because we're using the employees that would be in any portion of the building. On top of it, we're using trucks as well, which when you're looking at IT, land use, they would use the employees, and that would also include trucks in there when those are calculated. So we did employees plus trucks on top of it. But when we looked at the IT land use codes, we were using number of employees. I know of a couple of examples, the Foursquare facility and the one that's in Leicester as well, which the Leicester one had actually used a mix of not just land use code 140, but it also used warehousing, which is what it used for the greenhouse type of space. And so they used land use code 140, which is manufacturing, for just the processing component of the facility, and then for the remainder they used warehousing component. We did do just a rough comparison if we use that same methodology here. It did come out to be higher on a daily basis, although the daily numbers are a little bit skewed because they're based on a very limited sample size that are all below 500,000 square feet, so they're significantly smaller than this facility is too. In fact, most of them are based on only one sample size for the daily numbers. But for the peak hour numbers, we're fairly close, even with the empirical data that we did use. When you look at a combination of assuming land use code 150, the warehousing component for the greenhouses, and then looking at land use code 140 for the processing components. And I do have a sheet where I have those numbers calculated. I could pass that around if you want, rather than going through each individual number, but.
I just butted in, so
yeah. No, and I'm happy to kind of respond and to continue where Rebecca left off. In regard to the trip generation, I also did some research, and I did actually find a site in Colorado that was more of the kind of giant scale of this. I know there was an abutter comment that had come in that was comparing it to other sites, and you're right, they were more on the order of magnitude of 30,000 square feet, which is, it's very difficult to compare the number of trips at that small scale to something this large. But I did find a large scale facility. Interestingly, they had developed, and Colorado I think is a little further ahead of us here, they had developed a number of employees per square foot that's typically there. And interesting, the number of employees came out in a similar range to what they're talking about here. What I would point out, and perhaps ask your counsel, is because there is a fear, obviously, that this site could generate a lot more. If they had a lot more employees working at it, can there be a condition that then specifies the number of employees that are allowed on the site if it is approved? Because that is something that, if the trip generation is really tied to that, and if that's what we're talking about here, then some limit in that regard, I think, would make sense to protect the neighborhood from additional trips that are not being analyzed at this point. One thing I also did was thinking about the Land Use Code 140 and the manufacturing piece of it, looking at the site plan, and again, you know, a lot of it is greenhouse, but anything that wasn't specifically labeled as just a greenhouse space, and looking at that amount of space and comparing it in using Land Use Code 140. For that number of square footage, you do come into a similar trip generation profile to what they show here. As I said at the last meeting, though, even if they are incorrect, capacity on the local roads isn't the problem. I mean, the problem is, and I think you can see from the graphic Rebecca said, sightlines and safety is really the issue that you're dealing with on those roads, and they're going to have to do a significant amount of earthwork, which I think is important to make sure that those sightlines are available. So I'm glad to see that that had happened. So as far as the trip generation is concerned, it isn't an exact science. There are different sources. There isn't an exact land use code. My guess is ITE will probably, next time around, have surveyed enough sites, say in Colorado, that they can come up with a trip generation rate per square foot or per acre or per employee. But at this point, you know, we don't have that to rely on. But as I said, on the local roads in this area, the concern isn't the capacity. As you get out to Route 20 and you're waiting at, you know, that side street to get that green light, there is a concern about delays and queues, and that is definitely a concern at that location. I did follow up with Mass DOT, and one of the questions that I asked was, are they amenable to taking green time away from their main road and giving it to the side street? Because in some cases they aren't. They like to keep that green band moving, and they don't want, but he did say in this situation, because there are some longer queues and some longer delays anticipated, that they would entertain modifications to the true traffic signals that have been identified. The other question that I asked was, you know, are they amenable to an access onto Route 20? He did say they prefer to not have an access point along Route 20. What they definitely do not like is where the access point was proposed by this project. And we're under the impression it is possible there could be another location that they could be amenable to. They would much prefer it be on a local street and have the access be via an existing traffic signal. There's no doubt about that, but he did not rule out that there could not be a possible, but he did reiterate what Rebecca said about the concerns about sightlines in that stretch right there, and you know, some of the other concerns that she mentioned. So she did report that conversation back accurately. Let me just see if there was something else I had made a note of. One thing that the current traffic study does take a look at splitting those employees up over different shifts. I would say that the board should be particularly concerned about, it should decide what the concern is. Is it having a shift end in the evening peak hour when traffic is the busiest at the signals on Route 20, or is it traffic leaving when the schools are emptying? And I mean, that's really a value decision. That's less of a capacity or really a traffic decision. It's more a value or a safety, you know, question. With staggered shifts, the impact in any 1 hour is less. I don't know that that's something that you can condition, however. So you have to keep in mind what was originally, like in the original study, what was listed, that it's 2-shift operation, everybody's coming or going during a peak hour, could conceivably happen. So just because they plan to operate a certain way that would kind of spread those peaks, that doesn't necessarily mean that that would be the case. And as I said, really what that affects in a traffic engineer's mind is more what that impact is out at those traffic signals. It is less, there is the capacity available on the local roads. As I said, really, for me, the safety concern in the sight lines being there is what's most important, regardless of the volume of traffic that's added. They did take a look at the concern about there being a little bit of a higher crash rate, at Old Worcester Road and Morton Station, and made a suggestion about moving the stop bar out. I would also ask if Rebecca could take a look at considering center line, because I think part of the problem is when those left turners are cutting the side, they're not staying on their side of the road up to the intersection. And because it is narrow, perhaps the town has avoided putting some striping on there, but I think, you're gonna want those people a little more organized to keep things a little safer. So it's something to at least look into. And, to talk perhaps to, your highway department, about that possibility, just because I think if someone's cutting the corner enough to not notice they're about to hit a vehicle, I don't know that the stop line being up there is going to help them change their behavior, but if there is a center line and the possibility that, they could get a ticket for crossing it, maybe it would start to make people start to think about it. At least it's an option, it's something to look into. And I think that was, kind of my comments on the information that was provided in the supplemental fashion. Thank you.
You made, Jen, where was the location that DOT did not like?
The location that Rebecca said that
Was
they
it that-
investigated, it was towards kind of the east side of the property.
Okay, because prior there was a location further west when they were talking about the retail store. I just want to make sure they're not thinking about
No,
that.
as far as I know, that wasn't evaluated, because the concerns were very much had to do with the curve and the grade. I'm sure you could probably get some information back from Rebecca about specifics kind of along that frontage, like where those issues are present and whether there is another location that's possible. Again, I have not done any independent investigation, just he was clear to me that he definitely does not like where it was proposed, but they're not necessarily saying that they're gonna preclude access to Route 20.
There was one for solar, right? Was there access for solar?
Yes.
Was proposed, or did they actually get?
I believe they were approved for that. That was a much different situation. There was more construction access, very little daily access for that solar farm.
One other question I had. When you're coming out of L. Turner Road, making a left onto Old Worcester Road, first off, right at the bottom of, right where those two roads intersect, I don't know, the last 20, 30 feet of that is on a very steep decline.
Yes.
When you're coming out there, no matter how much clearing you do, you're on a curve. You cannot see.
Yeah, well, let me stop you, because it isn't clearing, it isn't vegetation that's being taken away. They're gonna have to regrade that. They're gonna have to take, by that site driveway, they're gonna have to take, which is currently a steep hill, and really pull it back. So they're really gonna regrade for those sight lines to make those sight lines better. It's a fair amount of earthwork, it is.
Okay, just as long as they realize, because I've come out of there a couple of times and it's atrocious to
No,
try and make a left
I
out of there.
completely agree, which is why from the beginning, I brought that up as an issue.
And making a left onto Morton Station from Old Worcester Road, that's not too much of a problem. I found it worse making a right onto Morton Station from Old Worcester Road. You cannot see, and I found that to be worse. I'm still in favor of Route 20. That's just my opinion. And I know, not DEP, MassDOT may not like it, but it should happen. And you can follow in to the right or the left of the proposed, the gas line. And with the exception of having some wetlands up near Route 20, You can even cut across it.
I believe actually that was in the vicinity of the location that Rebecca was contemplating and to approach them about. I haven't seen an exact sketch that shows where that
Okay.
access was, but my impression is that it was to that east
Right there.
side of the property. So because of it being located on a curve, that is not an appropriate place according to Mass DOT.
Curve's not that bad. That curve on 20 is
Much
far better than the one on Old
But
Worcester Road.
how bad a curve is related to the speed of the traveling public at that point.
Old Worcester Road. I mean, the posted speed, right, the driven speed, I know that's another thing.
True.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
Just add to with the proposed grading, would you consider it a safe entry and exit?
Yes,
Okay,
if the
gotcha.
sightlines are adequate, it
Okay.
would be a safe entry point, yes.
Jen, did you look at the tractor trailer movements in and out of Altoona?
Yeah.
Are they adequate? Just to-
I
That was gonna
actually
be my
haven't
question, is-
seen a truck turning, for, you know,
Michael,
the,
could you,
That's almost like a 45-degree angle to get in there from Morton Station to get
Michael,
to
could you address
Altoona.
the truck turning movements in and out?
Yeah, we're done. I was provided, yeah, provided.
What have you found?
There's no.
You sure?
well, they'll be doing a lot of grading now, so, you know, they'll make it a little easier for the trucks to
Yeah,
get
we
that
need to
hill.
update. We do need to update based on the comments and then rerun it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Can you provide that to Mike Andre too, so that he can review
Yep,
that?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I'm going to open it up to questions. Please keep it on the subject matter under 3 minutes, please. And we get comments, but we prefer questions to help things flow a little easier.
So, Madam Chairperson, I'm Brett Moore, 15 Hammerrock Road. I know I asked this question last week too, about Hammerrock Road. I know we've had at least one tractor trailer roll over there into my neighbor's yard with an excavator on it. And it doesn't seem like anybody really cares about that sight line. It seems to be pretty short. I don't know, maybe that's not enough traffic off of Hammerrock Road, or, but I know in the past, school buses use that road a lot, Hammerrock. They go down there and turn around and go back up. And we have had some accidents there.
Did we ask them to look at Hammerock Road last time?
I asked the question, but I don't think it got
No, because if they're coming in from Route 20, they're not gonna go past the facility. And no other traffic's gonna come up this way.
Unless they come up Main Street.
Yeah, but.
yeah, so our trucks aren't proposed to go past Hammerrock Road at all. They'd be coming in from the east of Hammerrock Road, coming into the state. So Hammerrock is to the west of Altoona.
But there is proposed, I think, Madam Chairperson, there is proposed just traffic, just people coming to work down from that direction, correct? And the sightline is off.
Yeah, there may be other locations that have deficient sightlines. I would not be surprised, based on the alignment of Old Worcester Road, that there are plenty of other locations that have limited sightlines. You know, as far as for new development access, to evaluate the safety of that access, you tend to look at the sightlines there and ensure that if I'm creating a new traffic generator in Spont, that there is safety there. But not every intersection, then, you know, there are probably plenty of deficiencies in town, but I did not look over every location.
My last question, just for clarification, then no big trucks are gonna go that way, go west on. They're all gonna come out of that road and turn left. Is that what I'm?
That's correct. Is that something can be specified in?
Is that
Left-hand
conditions?
turn only.
Yep, if there's a safety problem, there's no reason why you can't. Just worked on an industrial park in,
Who's gonna control that? Barbara Morris.
Hold on one second.
just worked on an industrial park in Holliston where all the traffic is routed through designated roads to get to Route 16, and then there's an intersection there. They all want to cut to a signalized intersection in a residential district, and the enforcement has to take place through the building inspector's office or through the police department.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we banned trucks on Berry Corner Road from coming in and out. I don't think that they allow trucks to go into the landfill to cut through. Is that correct? And
You might have
they have to
traffic
come.
exclusion then.
So, there couldn't possibly, I'm not sure about the process of that. but
Jen,
I'm
you
sure
have,
we
there's a state law that has you
Yeah, you
consulting
have
with DOT.
to apply for that, and I mean, as long as there are adequate alternate routes for trucks, I mean, that seems like something that could be possible.
Thank you.
I have a question about, the whole traffic analysis was predicated on the number of employees that the entire facility would have instead of using, like you guys explained, the land use code and the gross floor area. But the business model being proposed by VGG is actually a tenant model, and I don't know how you would actually know how many employees your tenants anticipate to hire. How would you enforce the number of employees that your tenant's gonna hire?
It's gonna be contained within the lease.
So
We're
it's just-
following a very strict greenhouse model and what can and can't be done in the property. And every tenant is gonna have to abide by the rules and regulations set forth.
So you're gonna tell them how many tenants they can, and how many employees they can have?
Yes, we are.
Can I ask a question? How many parking spaces are being proposed on the site?
263.
So there will be some limiting factor based on that. I would be more nervous if they were proposing 500 parking spaces and claiming they were gonna have 300 employees. But at least that would be something the building inspector can very easily drive by the site and see and quantify if they're parked all over the lawn, for example, and get a feeling for whether they're sticking to the correct number of employees.
I would request that.
Name.
My name, Ed Codgeling, 47 Hanson Road. I would request that, we seem to be going down this same questions over and over about employees, how many, and there is no way to really enforce how many employees these guys have. The only defining fact that we can enforce, I believe, is the occupancy on the building permit. So whatever the building permit says is the maximum occupancy would be what we should be designing and talking about for everything, moving from wastewater to water use to traffic. And it seems to me that that number doesn't seem to be forthcoming, and it should be a very simple, number for them to generate. That, what is the occupancy that is driven? The fire marshal I believe has control of that. Obviously, for fire reasons, how many people he can have in it, and that number is critical to this entire project. And I would. Well, no. What I'm saying is, it has all to do with traffic, everything, and I would request that they come to the next meeting prepared with that number. Okay, because, getting the building permit 6 months from now and having this crazy number on it, and then everybody going, oh, geez, we didn't know, and all of a sudden this tenant he doesn't want to come to this place because he can't use as many employees, is ridiculous. Let's get down to the facts. Fact number one, what is the occupancy of this building? It's 1 million square feet, and that will determine, because they can come back at a later time and go, you know what, we need more parking spaces because we need this, we need that, and it's going to change all the dynamics of everything we've talked about tonight. It doesn't mean a thing. So that would be a defining factor.
Is occupancy something that we would condition, or is it something that would be set?
It's conditioned by the building inspector.
It's really more of a code issue than it is a zoning issue, but I don't see how it's unrelated to the safety of the premises, which is part of your assessment under site plan review. So we need to talk to the building commissioner with regard to the code part of it, but I think it all relates to the parking spaces and to the traffic generation that Jen is outlining here. So I don't think it's out of bounds at all.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chairman, I would just like to know, who you spoke to from Mass Highway regarding their comments, and I would ask that for the next meeting, we have their comments in writing from them, so that we, at least we can feel comfortable that, that they're being told everything that's accurate that's going on here. So I'd like someone from Mass Highway on Mass Highway Stationery with their name, and they sign exactly their comments, what they mean. Because here's the thing, I went back and got an article from 2007, okay, from Mr. Okay, I understand. Okay, for Mass, regarding this stretch of highway that was redone in 2005, okay? So the state, according to this, paid $17 million to reconstruct Route 20 from Richardson's Corner, 4 miles, west to 169. And they consisted of widening, regrading, adding median, 4-lane highway, new traffic zones, and the whole article was about how safe this section of road is because of all this work, and that the speed limit was actually increased as part of a traffic study done because it is so safe. So
one of the reasons for making it so safe is so that we could have access from Route 20 to access parcels along it. There's no difference between this parcel and the parcels across the street, the landscaping facility. They're on the same curve. So you have an industrial park, landscaping facility, a garage, they're all on the same curve.
Okay, get to know questions.
Okay,
He
so-
can take my time. We are very well aware of the need for Route 20 access. We're very well aware, so.
Well, I guess that is one part of it. The other part of it is that I feel that the traffic study really misrepresented.
Your time is really up, sir. I'm sorry, but you've gone way over your 3 minutes.
And I'll just
Yes.
comment on that. The improvements that MassDOT does in a lot of cases to a roadway like this is to limit access. I mean, that's how you improve the safety of a high-speed roadway. So, that is why they would prefer everyone to come out at a traffic signal. That's the safest way for everyone to get access to the highway. As I said, he was very specific about the proposed location being on a curve with limited sight lines, and that, is definitely a concern. Now, I haven't gone out and measured them, I can't confirm that myself, but that's their concern and they have their reason for being concerned with it. I'm doubtful that we would get a letter of some kind. I certainly can email and see if they would email in response, but I think you'll find the comments will be limited to what they were shown and that they didn't like what they were shown. The trouble is, until something else is put in front of them, there's nothing for them to comment on.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Okay. Hi, Noreen Smith, Dresser Hill Road. So in the memo that was produced on the conversation about the traffic study, it says specifically that you met to discuss options for direct access to Route 20. So I'm wondering what those options were that were discussed. And was a workable plan presented to the DOT for their review and comment, or was this just conversation? And third part, while I'm up here, was there any plan presented to regrade the sightlines, an actual plan, not a conversation or just, kind of the target shooting? And was there a discussion of fuel deliveries traveling on the residential road with DOT at the same time? So specifically, procedurally, I can't imagine you get a formal comment back from DOT unless a plan was presented and an application was filed. And I'm wondering, was that done? When will that be done? Where's any plan about access to any of these roads? Thank you.
So, Rebecca, I thought you cleared that. I thought you mentioned that in your. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't hear any options that were discussed.
Yeah, so we did talk about the specific location where we were looking to have a driveway, and we had a preliminary sketch showing sort of the alignment of the driveway and what the regrading and everything would be. But we also said, somewhere along this area is where we'd like to have it, and that entire area is along the curve. So they were really opposed to having it anywhere along that stretch because it's on a steep grade, it's on the inside of a curve, and because of the U-turns that would need to happen in that area, that was the major concern that they had, was not necessarily for the particular driveway, but also for the U-turns that would have to occur along that curved section of roadway. So.
If I could add to that, when we say the options were discussed, every linear foot of frontage of this property on Route 20 was in scope for this meeting. We came in with what we believe would be the best option based on our best engineering effort. We looked at every linear foot and could not come up with a plan that would meet the requirements to make that work. And so I'd expect MDOT might be able to elaborate on that as well.
So physically, there was no other place besides the place that you met with MassDOT over that you could put the driveway. So is that what you're saying? So there's no other physical place that it could go, or?
There's other physical places that there's wetlands, as we discussed in the first meeting. There's other physical barriers that prevent us from using other parts of this property. I just don't want anybody to leave feeling that we came in and proposed one thing, because that just wasn't how this meeting went. We looked at the whole thing, we looked at every available place on this property that we could possibly access it. And
So the stretch to the west of the wetlands was on the table as potential access, or it was decided no, because you have to cross the wetlands, it wasn't on the table?
It was discussed, but because of that huge wetland area, it's a very difficult area to be able to get an access through with crossing all of that wetlands. But it was discussed as a potential to do that.
Yeah, and I'm just curious because, like I said, what he said to me on the phone was that, you know, because I said, does that mean there's no location there for an access on Route 20? And he said, oh no, I'm not saying there's no location, it's just not where they want, you know.
Yeah, we asked the question of if we could make this work, would they consider it? They said it's better, but not great. So they weren't telling us yes, but they weren't quite giving us a hard no yet. But yeah, they definitely gave us a hard no on where we originally proposed it.
That location, you're
But with
actually on the
that-
outside of it.
That one is outside of the curve and it's not on a steep grade. That's why they, so I can kind of point to it on the map. The speed is still the same concern in that area. In fact, that's the area where we actually measured the speed, so it's even a little bit higher, but this is kind of the section here. So you can see the road's curving a little bit more like this, so we're on the good side of the curve at that point. At this location where we were looking at it, and it's actually right about here for the grading and everything, that was the best location to kind of bring it in, curve it around into the parking area. We're kind of on the wrong side of the curve where you're looking through the trees to be able to see oncoming
Can we ask you a
traffic.
specific question up here? Can we just bring you up here for a second? Why wouldn't you be able to come in through here? I mean,
cross over here,
because
go to
there's
the
a very little wetlands. I mean,
I know you can't come up this way and you want to keep away
I
from
might
that.
still like to kind of, he knows sort of the boundaries of the wetlands a little bit better. And this might be a grading issue in proximity to. So they were wondering why we can't come in over.
There's 7 feet of upland.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Explain what that
so-
means.
That means non-wetland area between where the wetland ends and our property line, 7 feet away.
So it wouldn't be wide enough to
So
fit.
a 20-something foot
where does the property end over? Just
Their property ends over here.
right here
But right there
is
is
the
what
only
he's
piece of
talking
upland. You have the entire site flag, wetland is. And there's one small piece of upland that just goes into a culvert. And it's 7 feet. Yeah. Might show up a little better. It's oriented, so it's right there. So the black line
Right.
is our flagged, delineated
Oh,
wetland.
okay. It's worse on that page.
Well, yeah, that's why I wanted to flip to it. I mean, it kind of,
It's
I
worse on that.
think, 7 feet is, I think, a little more understandable at this point. So consider, right, yeah, and consider, even a 24-foot access drive over a 7-foot width. You're going into the wetland. And that's just the roadway. Then you've got to grade it, you've got to finish it, you've got to reestablish the wetland, you've got to put a culvert in, you've got.
I really, it's not easy.
No, it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. And it's also not necessarily something that Army Corps would approve.
Yeah, it's not, it's frowned upon.
It's not a guarantee, no, absolutely. The Wetlands Protection Act allows you to go up to 5,000 square feet of wetland alteration. After that, you go to Army Corps. But just because you go to Army Corps doesn't mean they're going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. So we could do all that work and they say no. We don't own this piece.
I understand
Yep,
that.
just let you.
Yeah, I totally understand.
And they
that.
asked, the DOT asked, what about this parcel here?
Right, coming up this side or coming up just the outside of this side of it?
Right here. Is that what you said? Sorry. That point, the slope is worse, and because of this here. Yeah, and the proximity,
Oh,
the U-turns right here.
You say U-turn.
Jug handle.
Jug handle.
Okay, sorry, jug handle, yep. Better term, jug handle's right there.
Yeah, because you can't actually make a U-turn onto to go
Well, that's actually, this
westbound.
is what, that's what this is for here.
That's,
Yeah,
the
so-
vehicles coming this way can make that U-turn.
Oh, that's where, the industrial
Correct.
park. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
So you'd be so close to that, that DOT would, I would assume, would frown upon that?
It's an awful turn over there, it's almost blind. It's like one of the reasons
Because then you'd be
you can't see who's coming
car
up.
leaving to get over.
Yes.
This is essentially a conversation that happened with DOT. This is how, we said, this is what we thought, they said no, we just kept going, what about here, what about there, what about there?
Which you can see looking at this wide grading lines, they would have wanted to be up somewhere in here.
Right, and also the gas line, we can only do so much over it. We could probably go over it, but we've got to make sure that we're flat and we're not
I
excavating.
got a house over it.
Come on, I didn't recommend that either.
I wouldn't want to have a house, but I mean,
We
we
can't
do have.
regrade it.
So I think you can see that's the iterations we went through. And then again, now we get into wetlands.
Okay, but if you, and I realize you don't know. Come up this way. Oh, no. You do own this.
All wetland.
Yeah,
right there.
This, yeah, he stopped flagging it because of 2 point, but it continued, you can see the culvert, flow path there. So yeah, it is probably, so it probably continues.
What's this like here to get from here to here?
That's not this.
I understand.
What do you mean?
State.
Yeah. Almost 100 feet across.
Like 3 minute timer.
And then partial landing behind this house is here.
No, I was gonna come here.
We don't own that.
You can.
I think that was
That
very
would put the
helpful.
traffic out on Old Worcester Road real
Just
closer.
closer.
And it would eliminate all this traffic on Old Worcester Road.
We understand.
This I just think is horrendous.
Just sitting there.
I think you ought to show the audience the 7-foot drum.
I'd love to.
Do they want to come up here?
I'll put it up on the board over here.
Oh,
just real
okay.
quick.
Thank you.
I was asked by the board to just reiterate a little bit of the conversation we just had. The question was if we were to access this, our site, this is existing conditions plan. If we were asked to access our site down further west of our property, could we get up to our site? And it's not a colored up plan, so I apologize, but there's this large area with what looks like kind of leaves in it is a wetland. We've gone out and delineated that, so we know where it is, we've surely located. Right down here, and you can't see it from where you are, but there's 7 feet of what we call upland, in other words, non-wetland area, that we would have in order to get through to our main site. So as I explained to the board, we would certainly exceed the threshold that the Wetlands Protection Act allows of alteration of 5,000 square feet of wetland, which would kick us into an Army Corps of Engineering permit. Similar to DOT, there's no guarantee that we would get it. So we could go through it all and be denied. So, I think that was what you wanted me to summarize.
That was my question. That was a part of it. So in exploring those other options, that if you look at wetland reproduction and actually, is that what you're saying, not willing to put a plan together for? And then did you discuss the fuel deliveries with the DOT when you presented the plan to come in off the residential roads? So is there wetland reproduction as an option, and then did you discuss fuel deliveries?
So to answer the fuel question, I don't believe, Dan, do you want to answer it?
Yeah, the fuel question was not discussed with DOT.
And in terms of the wetland replication, that'd be a secondary piece of proposing to alter or fill. The permit would be, and that's almost required, it's usually a 2-to-1, sometimes more. The permit would be judged on whether or not they'd allow us to fill. So that the replication is a subsidiary of that, it doesn't really play into the decision. That would be required. I think that answers the question.
So yes, with the idea that the wetland isn't actually a barrier to construction, but it presents options for reproducing the wetland in other areas if you're gonna take up part of that space. So reproduction is an option, a replication of wetland is an option.
Reproduction or replication would be required. It doesn't necessarily guarantee approval.
Right, but the plan could be developed for review. Thank you. I think the fuel notion is important, that DOT was suggesting that all of this traffic go through a neighborhood without knowing what that traffic entailed and the danger presented in the longer trucks, the fuel itself, and the residents right next door. Thank you.
Okay, 90 Old Worcester Road. I was wondering if there was any, oh, I'm sorry.
So we did share with DOT at the meeting what the trip generation was and what our anticipated trucks and deliveries and all of that would be. And the trucks was one of the reasons why they didn't want to have access out onto Route 20, because the trucks would need to make U-turn movements on a high-speed, multi-lane roadway at an unsignalized location. So they would prefer them to have the trucks coming out onto a 2-lane roadway to a signal instead.
Okay, I'm sorry, my question was, has it been addressed on the type of traffic that will be traveling down Old Worcester Road as they're building this, like when they're removing dirt, the bulldozers, the lumber that's gonna be removed from there? What kind of traffic is that gonna be? I mean, that's a lot of heavy equipment coming down that road. Is our road safe to have that kind of heavy equipment on it? What's gonna happen to the vibrations of those vehicles, to the foundations of the houses that are closest to the roads? Has any of that been considered?
We did discuss that at the last meeting, that the road physically can handle that. You can correct me.
Yes, but I'm gonna guess that the developer probably has an idea of, or the site engineer could probably come up with a length of construction and an approximate number if you just want to know how many truck trips that would correlate to. There probably is a ballpark calculation that can be done, but until a contractor is chosen, I'm guessing that there's no way to really know how they're going to approach this construction.
So there's really not a construction plan.
Just a fact of the matter on this one is that with 1 million square foot of floor space at 8 inches thick, you're just going to require, just for the floor, it's going to be 2,300 concrete trucks just to pour the floor. That's not the footing, that's not the footing, the walls, foundation, any of that. Just the floor, it would be 2,300 concrete trucks. And then by the time, they got to go in, they got to come out. So that's about, almost 5,000 concrete trucks just to do the floor on the road itself is a rural country road. It does not have, it's not designed for that kind of loading.
Can you work on trip reduction, on what that will look like and entail for the build out of the project?
And again, to order of magnitude, because obviously we haven't worked out exactly how much cut or, needs to be done, or how much, earthwork is being done, or how much, but, just your ballpark estimates, questions like that to pour that foundation, is that, what would you say the number of trucks is that would be coming to pour the foundation?
Yes, ma'am, we can put that together for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Just one more little question. Are the trucks that are gonna be doing the construction, removing the dirt, removing the trees and all that, are they going to be held to only making a left-hand turn out of the property? Or are they gonna be allowed to go left or right out of the property?
We could make that a condition as part of the plan, if we thought that was needed. And I
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
So I one more comment, Madam Chair. Is it fair to say that the board can actually make a condition that they actually have access to Route 20 or they can't continue? In other words, if they cannot obtain highway access from Route 20 from Mass DOT, can the board make that stipulation that they have to have that or they can't proceed with the project? Because I got to tell you, looking at what's going on the rural country road, it's a little bit. It's just kind of preposterous what these guys are doing.
The board can make reasonable decisions in any conditions in any
condition needs to be, you can help me answer that.
It has to be reasonable and
It can't
has
just
to
be our
follow.
opinion.
Okay.
We need to have some support for why we would make a decision like that.
And typically, the board relies on its consultants, so the peer reviewer for traffic would have to give an opinion that this is unsafe and that no matter of mitigation could fix it. And I think the applicant has represented that they would have difficulty coming in that 7 feet, and they'd have to go to Army Corps, and it would probably be something that would be debated at Army Corps. But are you at Conservation Commission now? Are you going to Conservation Commission?
Yes.
So who does Conservation Commission typically use as a peer reviewer here?
The same one that the planning board uses.
And who's that?
Graves Engineering.
Okay, and do they have a wetland specialist on board there?
No, they typically review the civil engineering aspects of the plan.
Do they farm out the wetlands?
Yes, they do.
And to whom does that go?
Ecotech, I believe.
Okay, so that's the person that you need to ask the question. If they've represented that they don't want to go to Army Corps because they think it'll be a tough road to hoe, we're sitting here guessing as to whether that's true or not. If that person can be brought on board to tell us, oh God, you'll never get that approved, then we know the answer to that question. Otherwise, we're just trying to, put a finger up into the wind here.
Hi, Christine Bro, Prenia Road. So I'm of the impression that you have to make a decision the beginning of December, is that correct? So judging by how this timeline is moving, if you don't have all the answers, can you make your decision?
Yes.
So can you say, yes, we'll go ahead with it, we trust that all the rest of the pieces will come together?
No, you can't.
Or can you
can't do that.
Or can you say, we just can't do this?
The law of site plan review is pretty succinct. It's in a footnote in a case called Prudential Insurance versus Westwood, and the appeals court spells it right out. You can deny site plan review for an application which is incomplete or which shows non-compliance with zoning. You can impose reasonable conditions on the proposal, even at the expense of the applicant. And the last one is pretty much unexplored territory. The site plan can be denied where the conditions associated with it are so intractable that you can't fix it. There have been plenty of cases tried under that third banner, especially by neighbors. None have been successful in history. And that's an 86 case from the appeals court. So 32 years later, nobody has been successful. So you focus on number 1 and number 2. We can impose reasonable conditions. We'll work with the applicant. I'm getting the sense here as I become acquainted with this at my first 3 hours of it, that we may need additional time. And that's probably something that we'll negotiate, but we won't do it here tonight. I'll make a phone call.
At the last meeting, one of the residents had suggested that they take the opportunity to expand the time, and they did not want to do that.
Well, there's plenty of conversation that generally is had by in between attorneys for matters such as this, and that's what the telephone was invented for. So we'll have a conversation.
Brett Moore, Canama Rockford. So back to that eco-tech company, are we gonna bring them on board and let them say, hey, maybe we can replicate some wetlands, we can do this, and we can get that?
That would be conservation.
Well, the issue hasn't come up until tonight, so I'm not sure what the plan would be, but they typically are a sub to our engineering company, Graves, so if necessary, Graves could bring them on board for that project.
So, well, I guess my question is, it might be conservation, but this is kind of important to what we're talking about with traffic too. Maybe conservation should be sitting at the table too right now with you guys to help you decide about traffic. Maybe the Route 20 access is the doable thing.
I don't think it's that it's necessary to have dual meetings with the Conservation Commission. This is a phone call that can be made to the technical assistant of the Conservation Commission.
And that's what I'm asking, is anybody who can make that phone call?
Probably me.
Oh.
As directed by the board, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Knowing
That's
what the
I'm
board
asking. Is the board
wants.
going to direct that? I guess that's the best way.
That's what you're after.
That's
It's
what-
something we would request.
it is something you're going to request? Okay,
Well,
great.
can we talk to the conservation
I'll let Todd know that the phone call will
and
be
the phone call will be
forthcoming.
coming?
Perfect, that was my question.
I just want to have a 10-minute conversation to find out, yeah, that's dead on arrival, or I've seen it done before.
Greg Michael, 65 Old Worcester Road. First of all, I was on the Conservation Commission years ago, and they will do site visits, and they will assess everything and come up with a plan that could be utilized or considered, and they do have resources to check on that, so that's a great move, and I hope we do that. Secondly, I'm a little confused because there was access granted for the solar company off of Route 20, and I would think we could still get some same kind of consideration to have it on Route 20, and the reason for that would be you would negate all the concerns that we have on the residential roads. And I gotta tell you, I walk pretty regularly, I walk the road, mornings, nights, evenings, depending on the time of the year, but there's plenty of traffic already on this road, and it's not safe. And between school, teachers, and commuters, the road's already deteriorating from construction trucks that have come out of the Burlingame property that uses the back road instead of Route 20. There's all the reasons why to consider having Route 20 as access as opposed to the residential areas for safety's sake as well. So it sounds like they're willing from the state to work that. And I would strongly recommend that we come up with a plan that way, rather than go through half an hour of discussion of all the concerns where we've lived for the last 30 years, at least I have.
Noted, we understand that.
Okay.
So let's take one more question. We're obviously gonna come around again, but we have so many other things to discuss. Lisa.
Thank you, I will do we, since day one of the saga, we hear numbers like 400, then deliver shift by buses, and now we have solid 300. Am I correct? In your calculations, 300 cars? Yes, no? Yes. So, but you never even consider taking into account residents of Charlton. And they count this morning from 5:30 to 7:30, it was about 75 cars passing along my property. So add to your accounts another, I don't know how many. Put the counter wire and count how many cars Charlton.
I believe that count was taken with that.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
the car
was
count.
presented at the last meeting on traffic.
Oh, sorry. And how many?
I don't recall, but I did review all of the technical aspects of the study, and, you know, the volume on Old Worcester Road is appropriate for, you know, it is a lower volume residential road at this point.
I'm talking about 100 cars and 2 hours, and you adding 300.
Yep.
And it's still okay?
Yes.
And how I exit from my driveway? Is it every half minute I have a car?
Yes.
Oh, I'm in a circle. Carry on.
Okay. Last. Like,
Question,
question,
I just
please.
want to also mention that we have a lot of kids on our road that ride their bikes and scooters.
You know, we've gone through this. We definitely don't need reminders. We know. I swear we know. So I just want to move on. Where would you like to move?
Peter Boria, water and sewer.
Hey, Peter, will you come up and update us
Peter, would you prefer to have the applicant give a presentation first, or would you just share the comment on what they?
So I think it'd be good if they want to give the same presentation they gave the Water and Sewer Commission on Monday night, and then if they can't answer questions, I'll try and answer. And Alex McKenzie from the Water and Sewer Commission is here as well.
My apologies for, again, not having a better handout or visual aid for everybody to see. I think the board has copies of this. I'm not even going to stand here and hold it up because I know you can't see it. So, as part of this project, there's a balance of water that's maintained throughout the project. And what we did is we put together a diagram that shows the water that's coming in, the water that's being stored, the water that's being processed, and how the water leaves the property. So of the water coming in, there's really three major sources of water coming in. There's combustion condensate, so this is through the combustion process of the cogeneration plant, the water that's created from that. That water is used as Mike Thornton mentioned earlier. It goes to the cooling towers. That's used as a way to process heat from the cogeneration plant. That water is recycled, but every day a small portion of that is pre-treated and discharged into the city sewer. That pre-treatment happens under a special town permit, and that's all handled with the water and sewer department. The next major source of water is the city water, and this is again the water coming from the Southbridge Water Department. There is proposed to be an 8-inch line that's going to come up Old Worcester Road in the reasonably near future, 12 to 18, maybe 12 to 24 months, we hope. In addition, there's a 12-inch line that runs along Route 20, and that is not charged. There's no water in it at the moment, so it's not pressurized. So we propose to use city water in three ways. First, and it would come from either one of those two, but this is pending further discussions with the water sewer department. But the three ways would be, first is the facility potable water. So this is the water that's going to be used by the employees for typical employee processes, bathrooms, kitchen, shower rooms, things like that. And again, that would go out into the city sewer as typically it would. The second would be for fire suppression. So for the sprinklers that would be used in the facility, this could be a source for charging those sprinkler systems. And the third way the city water would be used as a auxiliary source for the water storage for the greenhouse operation. So the primary water source for the greenhouse operation is rainwater, which takes us to the third source. So of all the rainwater that hits this facility, I should say, of all the rainwater that hits the impervious surfaces of this project, 65% of that is required to be recharged back into the ground, and 35% of that can be recaptured and put into basically the water cisterns, the water storage. So that's the primary source of how we're going to fill up the water storage and be used in the greenhouses, which I'll talk about in a minute. So again, city water would be an auxiliary source for this in periods where we didn't have enough rainwater. This would, the water storage we're talking about is a couple of months worth of storage, so it would have to be pretty long drought before we'd ever have to use that. That being said, some of the discussions with Southbridge and with the water sewer department involve turnover rates if we're using certain lines that are set up, the Route 20 line. So that might actually have a minimum requirement for us to draw on a daily basis in order to keep the water turning over. So once we have the water that's going to be used for growing operations inside these cisterns, water is brought in at a rate of about 30,000 gallons of new water every day. That's going to come into the nutrient and fertilization system within the greenhouse. This is a hydroponic system. There is a lot of water that's being piped around and constantly fed to the plants, but over 85% of that is recycled and brought back into this system after being treated within the greenhouse. So what ends up happening is any water that gets lost through this operation happens primarily in two ways. One is evaporation, meaning that after it's been filtered out, the air that's getting filtered out of the greenhouse, it can be lost that way. And the second one is through the plant waste itself. Plants are primarily made up of water. So So that's essentially what's the water in, processing the water out of this facility.
So, Madam Chair, the Water Sewer Commission met Monday and Dan was present to give us that same presentation. They listened to it, they had questions, much like I'm sure a lot of people in the audience do, as do you. We have not been given a formal request, so there's been no decision made, affirmative or negative, as to whether or not any of these proposed uses will be allowed. There is, again, the water line on Route 20 is there. It's currently not charged, it's empty. If they did want to use that for fire suppression, they would be responsible for testing, chlorinating, flushing that line, seeing what's available for fire flows for that purpose. The 8-inch line that's going down Old Worcester Road, as Dan mentioned, to the best of our ability, to the best of my knowledge, it hopefully will be installed next year, so by end of year 2019, at least a portion on Old Worcester Road will be installed. Whether or not it will be charged at that time, we're not sure. It could be, depending on how things move forward. And sewer, we're looking at 2 different waste streams. One is sanitary waste, which would just be from their employees and typical, I guess, commercial use, and not commercial use, but typical use from employees, such as showers or a small cafeteria type of use. And the second will be process waste, from which we will analyze what they present to us for a request, which we have not had yet. So Dan talks about cooling tower water that might have to be wasted and sent to the treatment plant. Until we get a formal request and some true specifics, so we can have our peer engineer review it and our treatment plant operator review it, we can't even start to say yes or no. So we're at the very beginning of the project with them as far as the, I guess, deliverables of information, and as it moves forward, as we get more information from them, I think the commission will start to make more decisions. So again, just to reiterate, we have not gotten the specifics to even send for peer review, much like you guys do. So until that happens, the first meeting was very informal. I've met with Dan, just much like Bill, on a couple of times previously, just to kind of give him what I thought, some of the lay of the land and what they're going to need to do. So that's where I believe the Water and Sewer Commission is right now.
Does the board have questions for Ira?
What do you want to do? We want to open up the, do you have an question?
No, I understand what the gentleman is saying, I've been there.
Okay.
Peter, is there sufficient capacity, water capacity, to meet their needs?
For water?
For water?
Yes.
Okay. And sewer, can the sewer plant, does that have capacity to treat what they're proposing to?
We have not been, again, we haven't been given a formal request. I think water, holistically speaking, I think as a water department, the more users, the better. It'll help us with turnover, it'll help us with flow, it'll help us, again, as far as running the business, more is better, as far as water goes. Sewer, until we get a formal request, the initial numbers that were talked about at our meeting on Monday night were possibly 5,000 to 6,000 gallons of sanitary sewer. If that's the case, where it's just simple sanitary clean sewer that doesn't have any processed waste or any type of chemicals in it, yes, I believe the plant can handle that. But again, once we get the formal request, we can have peer review, again, go over their design plans and see what they have proposed for actual specific utilities on the property, and then also talk to our treatment plant operator to make sure that 6,000 to 7, or whatever capacity is requested, that the treatment plant will be able to handle that. Not only the treatment plant, but also the infrastructure in the roadway and the pump station on Old Worcester Road. When we get that formal request, then we can start to truly analyze what the impacts will be.
Any pre-treatment they will be responsible for? If
Yes.
it required pre-treatment?
Most definitely. So as far as the sewer goes, I would anticipate some type of memorandum of understanding or some type of agreement like we have with Carl Storz or Treehouse, where, much like you guys are talking about limiting the number of employees, we would use the number of employees to identify what the possible sewer usage would be, and we would limit it to a certain number of gallons per day. And that they could use up to this so many gallons per day of, again, sanitary waste, which is the easy part. As far as process waste, no matter what the process is, this is what you're gonna do. This is what we're willing to accept based on what we believe the components are of that process waste. This is what you have to treat it to, and part of that will also be them proving that it's being treated properly, sampled before we get it, and also metered on the way out as well, so that we can truly identify and follow through with that.
Does, do you monitor, I mean, so if, do you, I guess, test regularly, do you know to make sure that pre-treated waste is
Yes.
safe enough, so it's something that you
Yes, so look, the MTAs we sample weekly. The treehouse we sample I believe it's every other week. And then Carl Storrs we sample monthly.
Thank you.
And they're all metered, so we know exactly what their average daily flow is.
So it's metered in, metered out. Water coming in is metered in.
No, sewer, actually Carl Storrs is sewer metered out. And same with treehouse, it's sewer metered out. Either through a mag meter or through a partial flue meter. And we also have meters going out for the MTAs as well. So we actually know what we're getting for flow for sewer. And Southbridge is delivering the water, so they have their own meter, so they know what they're putting into the water.
Okay. Yep. All right, we'll take some questions. Questions on the subject.
Brett Moore, 15 Amber Upper. So we're not gonna use, they're not gonna use any of the wells that are up there right now?
It's possible the wells could be used in very early stages, including possibly in construction, but we don't have plans for using the wells long-term to support this operation.
And then when we had the town meeting several months ago back in the library with Kleinfeld, the engineering firm that was talking about capping all our wells, and they've also designed that, they've been involved with that 8-inch line, correct?
Correct, they designed that 8-inch line.
Yeah, right. And I sat down and talked with that engineer that day that gave that presentation, and he said that line was not calculated for use like this, that volume of water that they're projected to use.
So we haven't been given a request of what the true daily volume of water will be.
Right, and I get
So
it.
until we get that, it's hard to analyze. And I think,
And I used the example of the 30,000 gallons that we were told at one of the BGG meetings, and they said that line wasn't capable of handling that, along with all the residents if they capped their wells. So I just want it on record.
and I get that, but until we get that request of
Understood.
that type of capacity, because what I see on the utility plans now is a true connection from the 12-inch main on Route 20.
Right.
And they're showing a 4-inch possible public water supply line for potable water that's capped off at the end of El Turner Road. It's not even showing a connection onto that 8-inch line. So until we get a formal request saying, we're gonna use this many gallons per day from the Route 20 line, and we request this many gallons per day from the Old Worcester Road line, then we can truly consider it and say, okay, yes, it can handle it, or no, it can't.
Right.
And until, again, because I haven't been presented with that.
And you'll bring
30,000
Kleinfeld in on all that?
Either Kleinfeld or our own peer engineer, our own engineer. Yeah, I'm sure, because Kleinfelder, they will work together hand in hand, because Kleinfelder has so much knowledge on that system right now.
Okay, then my last question real quick, and I don't know who will answer this, is so we were explained at that same meeting that the reason they want us to cap our wells is to stop this plume from growing. And if they're using, whatever, round numbers, 30,000 or 20,000 gallons a day, that's like 200 houses at 350 gallons a day. Is that, what happens if that expands that plume and it goes outside of that area that we're considering capping all the wells? What happens at that point?
Are you talking about BGG using their current?
Their current wells.
I can't.
Right, I don't know who answers it, or I'm asking the chairperson.
Is there?
Because it's water.
When we're talking about them using public utilities, and there might be some difficulties, but adding a condition that public utilities are mandatory, is that something that is reasonable and should be done?
The applicants made a representation that they don't plan to use those wells, so there would be if they would accede to that condition, it would certainly be something you could put in.
What I'm concerned about is that it takes a long time to get the hookups, or there's issues, and now their only source of water are these wells, and they come back and say, we want.
Are those public water supply wells now?
No.
Which is what?
And just to clarify that, because she brought it up, so my well hasn't been contaminated yet in 20-something years. So if they start using all that water in that plume, and I'm inside that corridor, my well is still, all the wells on my street aren't contaminated. And now all of a sudden they use all that well water, that contamination expands. Maybe I didn't want to cap my well, maybe I didn't want to use the Southbridge water. What's the deal there?
So it seems that we can use that as a condition since they're representing, so to make sure that.
Excuse me, do you know your wells aren't public water supply wells, are they? They're just private home wells?
They use it for the orchard.
So I'd like to, I think I have to go back and ask our licensed site professional who's not here tonight to clarify, because I want to clarify with him what they are.
Right, because if it's a public water supplier, you have to fill out forms and tests and everything like that. I don't know if the orchard was required to do that or not.
Well, you gotta have a zone 1 that you own.
Right,
and then
right,
it
entire
depends
zone
on the
1.
amount of water that's pumping
Right.
inside the zone.
Okay.
Because, well, at the end of my question.
Excuse me one second. Nate, are they public or not?
Yeah, exactly.
They were when we had the winery. As soon as the winery burned down, we were no longer under any requirements to have them test on a regular basis.
Thank you.
So the private well.
Alex McKenzie, Charlton Water and Sewer. The number 30,000 gallons comes up, if they're gonna be using it during construction, to go along with Mr. Moore's questions. What's the maximum anticipated daily use that would impact the aquifer in that area? And who's gonna do the third-party impact study of that area and how it's gonna be affected?
Nate, when you're operating the orchard, what are you using for water from those wells on a daily basis? Gallons per day?
When we were running the winery and we were running the irrigation system, we estimated we were using more than 60,000 gallons a day.
That's an estimated. Who's gonna, my
So-
question still stands, what's the maximum anticipated use?
So I think we
AGG?
would be comfortable with a condition that we wouldn't exceed that use. And I think the appropriate answer to the question as to who would review that, I believe you have engaged an LSP to peer review what Mr. Lilly has done. I don't know that we have Mr. Lilly on a calendar yet. I think we're trying to figure out when he can come back in. But I know at a prior hearing, Frank discussed results from those wells and confirmed that it was not pulling the plume, but we can have him address that and speak to that and coordinate the response to that with your LSP.
I mean, the 60,000, the 60,000 that you are telling me a day, is that, how do we know that? Does it?
It was tested by, the whole well system was put in by Charlton Well. We have an irrigation system. We know exactly how much water we need. We know how much it's pumping. And it runs 24 hours a day.
It's metered?
No, it's not metered. It's all been tested though.
Thank you.
I don't know how many gallons it's not metered.
Right.
Estimate how many.
You have to know, it has to be metered. That's, you can't do
I'm so excited.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
All right, so you know how many heads you have out there, you know how much water has to be, you know how much direction it has to cover. You watch how much it has to cover. You test it on a regular basis per head to make sure that it's giving you, if you're out there at 70 gallons, that you're getting 70 gallons out of it. You also know the testing that they've done in the well as to how big the pump is, and when it's wide open, how much you'll pump, how much your velocity is in your pipes, and how much pressure you're dealing with, the height that you have to deal with, the whole bit. So it's all was calculated with the USDA when we put it all together, and we knew what we were using every single day in the orchard.
Thank you. So my question is, we have this big sheet that shows all our water in and all our water out, and I don't see this, any blue little arrow showing water from a well. Are we now changing this from, to add the well? I just don't understand, like, that's why, I just want to see what's going on with the water. I want to understand it.
So it's our hopes to be connected to municipal water supply as soon as possible. And when I said we might need the well for construction, we might need it in the very, very early stages until we get, as I said, we're not building the whole project at once, but as the project comes online, if we're waiting for municipal water, then we might have to use that as a supply. But the reason it's not shown on that is because this is the anticipated ongoing state of it, assuming that we're connected to municipal water.
So if you know the history of water is promised this year, and then it goes up another year and goes up, and that's just how Charlton works?
That is exactly why we were saying post-construction, early stages, but certainly would agree to a reasonable condition and a reasonable limit. And to the extent we need to verify what those wells are pumping, you know, we can certainly get that information.
Thank you. Question.
Madam Chairman, with the uncertainty of the availability of water, who knows when it's going to be put in? We know the estimate is 2019, but there have been delays. So if there is a need to use water from these wells on the Orchard property, and I had a conversation with a DEP official, and I talked about the possibility of using that water and what it would do to the spread of that plume of MTBE. That official was very concerned about the use of those wells. So my question is, has VGG approached DEP to talk about that possibility and the potential harm to area wells?
We have not approached DEP. There would be no reason to approach DEP. We have an LSP. He's done an analysis for this, and we would suggest that our LSP communicate with the town's LSP, and the town's LSP could verify the research, the determination, the findings.
Well, Madam Chairman, just one last thing. I would suggest that there is a need to talk to DEP because of the harm that has been done to residences along Old Worcester Road by the contamination. And I think as a matter of caution and doing due diligence, the applicant should discuss this with DEP.
Bill, can you just reach out and figure out if there's more that we should be doing or on this subject matter? Because I know very little. I just don't, you know, I want to make sure we don't miss anything. This is a large project. So can you just reach out to DEP and see if there's something that we need to do, some other specialist or whatever, just to make sure that we're covered? Thank you.
I think the LSP would be able to advise you. They're deputized private, you know, stamp from DEP, so they're not going to, they don't risk anything. They just tell you the straight answer. So if their LSP talks to your LSP, that should probably cover the game.
Hi, Christine Brown, Prenier Road. Just a note is that with the drought of 2015 and 2016, one of our potable wells went dry. So we were having to wait a few hours to get a fill, to be able to take a shower or whatever. This is on our old farmhouse, not up on the hill. We have animals that they have to have water. So I just want you to know that we've gone dry.
Dan, I have a question on the schematic drawing. It indicates a clear box that says fluoride and chlorine treatment. Is that an indication that there would be fluoridation or chlorine treatment on the site? And if so, does that involve chemicals being brought in to manage water treatment at that location?
So, Mrs. Smith, actually that's the removal of fluorine and fluoride and chlorine from the municipal water source. So our plants cannot have those, so that has to be removed from the public drinking water before it can come into our reservoir. So it's actually a treatment, it's a filtering treatment we use to remove that.
And is there an outflow from that of chemicals that are abstracted from the water supply? Could you just explain a little bit what that entails in terms of facilities at the location?
Yes, so if possible, I'd like to come back with some more detail from our water engineer on specifically what that process is, to remove it and what happens to that material after it's removed.
A quick question for Pete, if I may. Does Southbridge have a cap of how much water they're gonna sell us to do this whole Old Worcester Road and the school loop? And what is your, excluding VGG, how much of that are we probably gonna use to do all those houses in the schools?
So our current agreement right now is 200,000 gallons per day average. Once the new pump station is built on Route 169, it goes up to 500,000 gallons per day. We currently use approximately 105 to 110,000 gallons per day. Once the Berry Corner Road water line extension, once the school loop extension, and once the overlook is connected, we're anticipated to increase to about 180,000 gallons per day.
That's all, that's the whole Old
And
Worcester
that would be our
Road.
entire system.
Yes.
We'll be at a total of probably, hopefully maximum 200,000 gallons per day. So it'll leave us, without VGG, 300,000 gallons per day of capacity with our agreement with Southbridge.
Move on to.
Fire, me. Keep off.
Evening.
Evening.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chief Ed Canal, this is Deputy Chief Jason Cantera.
Have you reviewed anything from them?
Well, much like Peter said, we've received the conceptual drawing. Without any formal plans in place, we have nothing to review. Therefore, there's not a whole lot for us to comment on.
How about the site plan, the roads, the access,
We've had discussions about the, you know, initially, we had a couple of sit-down meetings, and the site plan shows an access road completely around the site. We've given them dimensions as to what we need in order to get vehicles around the site. No issues.
Does that building, the entire building have to be sprinklered?
Again, we're talking about, I believe they even mentioned it, that they were looking to sprinkle the building. We as the fire service would gladly have them sprinkler the building. But again, it's a building code issue as well as a fire code issue. So until we see some sorts of formal plans.
Does the code require sprinklers?
You have a 75, anything greater than 7,500 square feet, but again, it's a use group thing. So there are, in this case, and again, I don't know what you're looking to call this, and again, we're talking about the zoning, what the use group is, but 7,500 square feet and above requires sprinkler.
So what do you need?
What do I need?
Tell them, what do you need?
What do you need to make it all, to be able to do a formal review and?
Building plans?
Building plans.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, that's what you go off of?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, we receive, you know, there's a plan in place where when Bill gets he ships them off to all the building commissioner, and we have 10 days once we receive them to review them, make our recommendations, and move forward.
Do you need them to run the turning radius on the layout plan?
We have those figures, and we've given them to them.
all of our apparatus, we've given them. That should be in our peer review.
We typically, you know, we typically use our biggest piece of apparatus, and if that can fit, then everything else can fit.
Chief, could you describe how you would respond to a fire up there? What would be your department's ability to accommodate or handle a fire or emergency?
Currently, we operate at 5 a shift with a minimum of 4 during the day and currently 3 at night. So depending on where we are staffing that day, that night, you would either get an engine and a truck, or you would get 2 engines. If we're at 3, obviously you're getting 1 truck, and then we're relying on mutual aid. And again, proximity of the building and where it's remote, we would strongly recommend the sprinklers.
Do the sprinklers put the fire out, or do they just? Contain, so they wouldn't put the fire out, it would just give people enough time to get out?
And it would keep it in check so that it would not expand and grow in size.
And how much water does that typically require, given the amount that they're proposing to use?
Again, based on use group, there are different size sprinkler heads that flow so many gallons per minute. So based on what they're using it for, again, without the site plan, I can't really give you a definite answer. But I will say that the more the industrial type buildings or your bulk storage type buildings, the more water flow you need to keep that fire in check based on the materials that are in the building that burn and the rate.
For this, how come we keep on saying we don't know what use group? Who defines what use group this is? But we're saying that we don't know the use, so it's, who determines that? Is that going to be first?
Well, it's based on the building plans, and then, so
we won't
their
know until we
architect.
get plans, then you can, okay.
Their architect will determine the use group, which will be reviewed by the building commissioner.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Do we want to? Subject to the scrutiny of our audience. I will open it up to questions. Alicia.
So, Alicia Jeek, 18 Old Worcester Road Extension. So let's just, building plans aside, let's just pretend that it's a 999,000 square foot greenhouse. There's multiple greenhouses, I believe there's going to be 10. On an idea of let's pretend we realize we're not holding you to anything, how much water will need to be available daily to support a sprinkler system of that size?
They're talking about cisterns holding 2 million gallons of water, more than sufficient.
Okay. So as a layperson, and I apologize, and I'll keep it under 3 minutes, but how does that actually work? So I don't know about the cistern system. They, much like a swimming pool, have to fill it with 2 million gallons, and then it just sits there in case they need it. Is it on call from Southbridge Water? And how does that actually work?
A cistern is basically a vessel that holds the water.
That's what I thought.
And we have an outlet that we attach into, and we are able to draft that water out of that.
Okay.
There are, throughout the town, there are cisterns and dry hydrants that supplement our water supply.
So how do they initially fill a 2 million gallon cistern?
I believe rainwater is going to be their best bet.
Okay.
Over time, take a little time.
And then hooking into the water line.
Other questions?
Hi, Ed Coxley, 47 Hanson Road. Are you concerned with all the extra traffic that's going to be on Old Worcester Road for you guys responding to a fire?
Am I concerned? No, I don't think so. Based on the numbers I'm hearing here, no.
Are you concerned with, so when you have a fire, like, let's say there was a fire at this building, it's 1 million square feet. It's going to be very difficult to track the employees inside to make sure that everybody's out. Is there anything that you would recommend that these guys do have in place so that you guys don't have to go into the fire looking for people? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Accountability for numbers, because it's so big, it's so vast.
Again, we can't dictate how they account for their employees. We would hope that they would have a plan. It's like you having a house fire. I can't account for who's in your house at any time, any given point during the day. We make the assumption that there are people in there until we are told otherwise, or proven otherwise.
So one of the things that thermal imaging is used in today's fire world.
Absolutely.
Does Charlton have thermal imaging? Will
We have one on every one of our frontline apparatus.
So we'd be able to use that, but is that going to work for a million square feet?
Well, it works in the area that we're searching.
Okay. Do you anticipate, the town having to incur costs because this building is so big and it's a manufacturing facility with extra manpower or extra equipment and extra training?
We have not, again, that has not been addressed. Would I like more? Sure.
Well, no, I'm just saying that, this is a little bit out of the norm for the town, this size of a magnitude of a building. It's a manufacturing facility. I believe it's a type F1 use in manufacturing. So I guess what I'm saying is that if the town going to incur heavy costs to upgrade the fire department with more firefighters, more equipment, I mean, you're going to need a bigger trucks because it's a million square feet. Those are kind of, we know it's a million square feet, so we know that number.
The use of a fire suppression system, such as sprinklers, is of great benefit.
Yep.
And it would, like I said before, earlier, it would contain the fire. It's not necessarily going to put it out, but it's going to contain it to an area that's more manageable and less likely to involve all 1 million square feet.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question, and probably for the chief. This is a little bit of a new, Steve Corona, 17 Old Worcester Road. This is a little bit of a new development for the town, and from what I understand and what I've read and what we've learned is they're going to recycle the CO2 from the cogen plant. I know we haven't got to the cogen part yet. Inject oxygen into the building, and it's all about the optimal growing part of the plant. People have to shower before they go in there, probably wear respirators, white suits. We learned the last meeting, probably not leave the facility to go to lunch, stay on site. Does the CO2 and the active oxygen concern you more in a 1 million square foot building? I would think it would. To me, it sounds a little explosive, or not, wrong term, but.
We have concerns about the processing methods, but again, we haven't had any sit-downs to discuss these.
Yeah.
And to act on it now would be premature, but we do have some concerns regarding extraction processing. We do have some concerns about the use of carbon dioxide within the system. So yes, those are things that we would sit down and talk about.
Yeah. And that could, yeah, that's fair. There's more to learn.
I have a quick question about the cisterns. Are these closed or are they open to the weather and whatnot?
Ma'am,
Like,
these are closed cisterns, they're covered.
Okay. So stuff couldn't get in there to, like, if you guys were gonna use it to actually put out a fire, it's not like a pond?
No.
Okay, that's okay.
Chief, any concerns with chemicals that will be housed in this facility in terms of your response?
Sure, but we have concerns of chemicals in any building in this town.
So
we never know what we're walking into, so we assume the worst.
But I assume you'll have a fire protection plan provided by the company that will
absolutely
provide protocols for you to respond to safely.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and we will be actively involved in the inspection process and doing site visits and inspections. We will be actively involved. You're welcome.
Thank you.
No, not tonight. Chief Maxfield could make it, and their security consultant will be here next week as well.
What did you say at the end, Bill?
Excuse me?
What did you say at the end?
The security part of this project will be reviewed next week.
So we do want to discuss the gas
gonna do their presentation. We haven't let them talk a lot about it.
Yeah.
We'll let you present the cogen facility. It's at the gas facility.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the metering and.
Can I ask, maybe, so we'll just start with the metering facility, and maybe have Mike Thornton just to describe what the metering facility is, and then transition over to the Liberty Utilities to talk about the interconnection process with the pipeline.
Do you want me to talk about the utilities of the building as well?
I think just the gas metering. We're prepared to talk about electricity as well, if that would be helpful.
So the building is going to be requiring hot water and chilled water for heating and cooling. That's like any other building. It's going to have a connection to the electrical utility. In this case, would be National Grid. So the process for that is applying a load letter. Once you get through this process, stating what the electrical loads would be. It also, Liberty Utilities will talk a little bit about the gas side of that. So those are the two main inputs into the facility. And the cogen itself will be using some of the natural gas and offsetting some of the electrical use that would normally come from the utility to power the lights in the facility for the grow areas, and also the support of the head house, and provide hot water and chilled water for the heating and cooling. So that's much like any other building, except for in this building that there are a little bit more lights for the grow of the cannabis that's in the grow rooms. Talk about the loads, or just talk about
metering. I think the metering.
So right now on the property, running on one corner of the property is a gas line that we're planning to tap that gas line and put a metering station, much like you'd have outside of your house, except for it's a little bit bigger because of the quantity that's going to be used. And that would be metered, and I'll let Liberty talk a little bit about that. That would be connected to the cogen where it would be used. There'll also be a backup boiler for periods that wouldn't be used to provide heating. And that's basically it. I think I'll let them talk about the gas.
Good evening. Let me just introduce myself, and everyone else can introduce, and give you a little bit about who we are and what we do for a business. My name's Mike Petit. I'm a Director of Business Development for Liberty Utilities.
RJ Ritchie, Senior Corporate Counsel for Liberty Utilities.
Gary Monroe, the Director of Operations and Engineering for Liberty Utilities.
Jim Carey, Senior Manager of Government Relations, Liberty Utilities.
So maybe just tell you a little bit about Liberty Utilities. We're a subsidiary of Algonquin Power and Utilities Corporation, which is a large publicly traded company which is based in Canada, in Toronto. We're an $8 billion company, so we have a lot of assets. Liberty Utilities is a company that operates in 11 states. We serve over 700,000 customers. We provide natural gas service, electric service, and water service in those 11 states. Liberty Utilities New England Natural Gas is an existing natural gas distribution company that operates in Massachusetts. We serve 6 towns and about 55,000 customers. And we've been in business over 150 years in Massachusetts. We are regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. And we are a natural gas utility, and that's only what we do in Massachusetts. There's another utility, the Liberty, that has been mentioned in town, which is Liberty Energy Trust, which is related to the LNG project. We are not affiliated with that company. We just happen to have a similar. So that's the company, and that's what we do. We provide natural gas service to a variety of customers, residential, commercial, industrial. What our plan with the greenhouse is, as Mike said, we would be responsible for the metering and the short pipe and a customer meter that would connect the interstate pipeline to the cogeneration facility. That's what we do for business. We operate 5 meters in our existing distribution system. It's something very common in the industry. And from a plan of action, what we will be doing is that we will be making a filing with the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, and that we will be looking to expedite that process. So our plan is to provide natural gas service to the greenhouse, and that's what the type of filing that we would make with the Massachusetts DPU. And I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants to add to that. But we're happy if there's any questions we can try to answer.
How long does that filing normally take?
It varies. What we've been told with RJ and our outside attorney, that we think that process will take 4 to 9 months. And it really depends on the schedule of the DPU and the complication of the filing itself. But we expect to be able to deliver service to the greenhouse in 2019.
So has Kinder Morgan been contacted at this point, or have discussions begun?
We've had a preliminary conversation with them about their interconnection process, yes.
Good. And it's something that they'd be open to and...
Yes.
Open it up.
Alex Canty, one question. 128 Simplon Road. It's a high pressure transmission main, correct?
The Tennessee Gas Pipeline dispenser lateral, yes, it is.
How high pressure?
The maximum operating pressure of that lateral is 700 pounds, PSIG.
So that would be maintained to a SCADA system somewhere else?
What we'll be doing is we'll be reducing that pressure.
No. I understand you'll be reducing the pressure before the meter, but will there be a SCADA system managing that at some point? And where's that SCADA location? Is it local, or is it elsewhere in the country?
The SCADA system would be located in the metering station, and not prior to that, in between the lateral and our tie-in to the metering station. And that SCADA system would then transmit real-time data to the Fall River facility, where we have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week manned operation with alarm system.
What's the closest crew?
We're going to be working out a mutual aid agreement to have a crew or responders close by.
Time? Is there time associated with that?
The regulatory requirement for leak response is within 60 minutes. Our average time in our company is approximately no longer than 20 minutes.
So it probably wouldn't be you guys, it would be another utility or a contractor to you guys?
Excuse me?
Would it be a contractor to you guys or your own employees?
I believe it would be a contract. Fully qualified, OQ qualified, and tested to be qualified to do the response.
And there's going to be inline redundancy between high pressure and low pressure metering in case of any kind of failures, correct?
Well, there's inline redundancy in terms of pressure control and secondary control to maintain safety.
Yep.
As far as the metering, there may or may not be dual metering. However, the metering doesn't have any influence on safety. It's more the control of the pressure.
How big is the service pipe going to be?
I don't have the data, but I don't believe it's any bigger than 8 inch.
Say that again?
The maximum I would project is 8 inch, probably even less.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Gerard Russell, Worcester Road. Can you help me understand the relationship between Liberty and VGG? Obviously a business relationship, or is it something that DPU would require a licensed operator to handle this type of operation? Is this something that VGG is partnering with Liberty as a joint business venture?
In short, no. We're working with Valley Green Grow as a counterparty in order to help supply them with the interconnect to the Tennessee Gas Pipeline. So there's not a joint venture. It's basically they would be a customer of ours, just the way that we serve the 55,000 customers that we serve in Fall River and the surrounding towns.
Madam Chairman, I have a question about, and I had a conversation with Dr. Goldstein maybe a month, maybe 2 months ago now, and he indicated to me that he had a plan for, in the connection to the natural gas pipeline, he had planned to have a municipal service that would be installed in the roads, Old Worcester Road, to service residences in town. And I'm just curious if this is a part of this plan.
Our focus is to serve the greenhouse at this time, and if there's a potential to expand the distribution outside of the greenhouse, that's something that would be discussed at a later time. And
Madam Chairman, I'm just curious if that's been discussed at all.
Part of the site plan review.
And just to be clear and to piggyback on something that Mike said, as part of the filing that we would make with the Department of Public Utilities in connection with our work with Valley Green Grow, we would have to appear in front of the Board of Selectmen to request a letter of approval from the town, basically allowing us to have a franchise here in Charlton to serve Valley Green Grow, and that would be part of our application that we would make to the Department of Public Utilities.
Madam Chairwoman, I have one question. Does this, is what they're saying, open the door to them, to VGG then becoming a utility provider?
I couldn't hear the question.
The question is, does this open the door for VGG to then become a utility provider?
No.
Kristen Custodian, 88 Carroll Hill. How do you know that you need 18 megawatts of capacity?
So there's a very elaborate model built on psychrometric calculations, available sunlight. This is a greenhouse. We're trying to maximize daylight harvest. So there's a very complex model simulation that's run to come up with these numbers and at what hours, what's required as far as heating and cooling. And, I guess Mike Thornton could expand on it if he wanted to, but that's how we arrive at the 18 megawatts requirement.
Can we have the calculation that equals this 18 megawatts? I guess part of my concern is the size of it. This is an agricultural lot, and we're putting a giant power plant on it. So if we could get smaller, we would, I think, feel a little more comfortable. So can we actually see that calculation that there's tons of engineers that we can reach out to for help, to help us understand? But can we see that calculation so we can, just for our, I guess for our own entertainment, whatever, but please provide that calculation so we have a good feeling that 18 is what you need and you don't really need 12 and there's all this access. And I get that there's fluctuation in seasons, but we can grasp that.
So this electricity question, if you have this power plant, why do you need to tap in with National Grid?
So basically, we would, like any other facility, put a load letter in for the load cogeneration as a benefit to increase the efficiency of heating and cooling and electricity at the same time, and it's actually through the Mass Save program. It's incentivized because they want people to be more efficient about their energy. So any facility would normally connect to the grid. They wouldn't run in an island. So there are a couple reasons for that. You want to have the utility source there all the time. The engines would be in sync with those, with the utility, and they'd be supplementing the power that's required. So the utility may be providing some of the power some of the time, and the engines may be providing. So like Dan said, different times of day, different sunlight conditions, there'd be different requirements for lighting.
Yep, so, and I understand, I appreciate that answer.
So,
Rhonda, my question was, so obviously you're generating three-phase power, and you're gonna have some kind of power lines. I mean, I don't know what kind of electricity we're talking about, if it's, you know, what voltage, 14,000 volts, 22,000 volts?
I think National Grid distributes in this area in the 15 kV level.
15 K, okay.
Right, which is about 13.8 nominal volts.
Mhm.
It's 13,800 volts.
Right, I understand.
So the interconnection, when we put the load letter in, they would tell us what's available. Under the Public Service Commission, we put a load letter in and we go through a normal process like anybody would, and they would tell us where we connect to and how we connect and how much power. And we put the load letter in, they evaluate it, and they would give us a ruling.
Right. And
So that's so essentially, I would imagine it would be at the 13.8 level, but until we get their ruling, and we have to go through that process.
Right, and so now you're gonna run overhead wiring to probably that power line out there that can handle that kind of load
So
level.
much like the overhead lines that run along everybody's street, probably not
No,
over.
I don't, there's no 13K in any of those
Well,
lines.
I'm sorry, Route 20.
Even Route 20 through Charlton, I don't know of any 13K. I know maybe they cross, but they're gonna go up there.
Again, they would
Across
have.
from the school.
They have to make that ruling.
Right, and I realize that,
Tell
but
us
that's
where
gonna
to
run over
connect.
somebody's house too. And they're gonna look, so we gotta do some kind of,
Your primary's
dressing up.
coming in at 13.8.
Right, I know.
So coming into the transformers on the pole, 13.8, so it's.
That's what it is on the street right
Not
now.
on Old Worcester Road.
Not on Old Worcester Road, it's not.
Yeah, I don't know if you have primaries there.
It's not on rules. So those wires, and it's not gonna be underground, is it?
Well, a lot of the secondary primary roads, like Old Worcester, would be 5,000 volts to 4160, and the little transformers
Yep.
would knock it down to what would feed your house.
Right.
Again, once they give us a ruling, they tell us where to connect, whether it's someplace on Route 20, or we have to go through that process.
So what percentage of what you generate do you plan on using, or what percentage do you plan on putting back to the grid? You're selling some back to the grid, I assume you're putting your excess back on the grid. How much of that?
Right now, I don't think we've made any decision on that. That's really a BGG decision. You know, you're allowed to send it back to the grid. A lot of people opt not to. It's an economic decision they would have to make. It's not allowed. It's allowed. So you have to go through the process with National Grid if that's what they want to do.
I may have missed an answer, but so Liberty already has permission with Tennessee Valley to tap into that and with the capacity, or is that still ongoing?
As I said, we've had a preliminary discussion with Tennessee Gas Pipeline about connecting to the pipeline.
And you're aware there's another big project that Tennessee's working on in town that's going to take up a little bit of capacity as well.
It's about 6 miles west of Green Hill,
Same pipe.
No, different pipe. There's capacity in the pipe for different parties.
You don't think there'll be a capacity issue? It should just be permitting or?
Valley Green's responsible to provide the gas to the meter station. But there's capacity in the Spencer lab to move gas on that line.
Madam Chairman, I'm wondering if Liberty Energy is aware that a power plant is not allowed in an agricultural zone where the orchard is. All that exists at this point is an advisory ruling from the zoning enforcement officer, but there's no official ruling that a power plant is allowed in an agricultural zone. It is, it's not allowed, and I'm just wondering how Liberty is dealing with that issue.
Liberty Utilities is a natural gas company,
Mhm.
and our role in this is to provide natural gas from the interstate pipeline to the cogeneration facility, and we're not involved with the power plant.
So your end of it is just the gas, not the power plant?
That's correct.
Okay. I guess the question then is more appropriate for the gentleman on the far left.
Yep.
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Madam Chairman, is this a zoning question?
It's apropos to the issue of the cogeneration plant.
does make sense, they are the planning board.
Would you like me to answer the question?
Is there an issue that the fact that this is an agricultural zone?
Sure, my name's Mike Thornton, I'm from Vanderbilt Engineers, you want?
Yeah, I'm not sure that, it seems to me this is a zoning question. I don't think that, unless you wanted to answer the zoning question, I just.
How about, do you think there's gonna be a problem obtaining your state level permits, knowing this is an agricultural zone area then?
I don't think that the zoning has anything to do with a behind-the-meter cogeneration facility that is allowed under multiple zoning areas. It supports its own use. It's much like a boiler or a chiller. You're allowed to provide that service to yourself. It's not a, there's a difference between a power generator and a generator who's behind the meter who has a, you know, so there's a difference between someone who's a load and has generation, and the difference between someone who's a generator and sells power. So their primary business is supporting their own load. So I don't think there is a problem in any zoning area providing your own power and cogeneration. I've never run into that, so I could be corrected, but that would be the first time. I've been doing this for 30 years.
You just gotta keep this.
I'm not a zoning, I'm not, but in my 30 years doing this, I've never, the cogeneration had that problem.
Brett Moore, 15 Amber Road. I'll address the question to you, but you might answer it. How many dB above ambient noise does this cogeneration plant generate?
Okay, so we have a noise engineer, we do have a noise engineer who will issue a report, and we will cover that on next meeting, which is gonna be a really fabulous meeting.
I guess, and the reason I asked, I know we limited 508 on how much noise above ambient they could generate. To 10, I think.
Yeah, we have we rely on our consultants heavily in those areas, and they will be in to advise us, and we'll go from there. Unless there's any other.
Madam Chair, one quick last question. The plan show, at least the version that I have, show 3 tanks for compressed natural gas, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think it said CNG. 3 tanks, each at 27,000 gallons each. And I'm just curious about, okay, why the need for them? How is that going to work? Why that volume if the pipeline is right there?
So right now, whether that's CNG or propane, so much like the propane stores, it's in a lot of rural areas supporting heating to homes. They're about the same size tank, 30,000 gallons. We had shown these as backup to the natural gas system as some on-site fuel storage. We showed a location for it, and that's what its purpose was.
And this is as a backup in case something happens to prevent damage.
If there's an interruption in service from the pipeline, it would be some amount of storage period to run the facility.
And not be used as a permanent source of power. You'll definitely not use this as a permanent source of power. These tanks are just for backup.
I think you mean primary, the primary fuel is the natural gas. This is an on-site storage.
I understand your question.
Backup.
Yes, I get it now, yes. It will not be, it's not the tanks are not intended to be the permanent source of power.
So that you can get my language.
It's
getting late. Last question.
No problem, Dave Lockwood, 69 Old Worcester Road. So if we use the natural gas as the primary source, does that take out of the equation of 21 fuel trucks per week? That's presented on the chart on the second page, or no?
Yes.
So the 21 fuel trucks are to provide for the CNG.
So the 21 fuel trucks shown in there is a contingency plan if part of the facility needs to be put in service before the interconnection is completed.
Right.
It's a means of putting the operation into service, coupled with electricity from the grid, in order to get the operation and our agreements with the town underway.
And how long would you expect to utilize that method prior to the metering?
Well, I think the question would be how long, in your experience, Vanderwild, how long would it take to finalize an interconnect agreement with the utility?
You mean the gas or the electric?
For the electric.
I think the electric is about the same as the gas, which is, I think they said by 2019.
It was 5 to 9 months
For the review
Right.
plus things in parallel.
The utility is about the same.
Yeah, so this would be enforced for the year, 9 months or so
I
until.
mean, maybe less, because as the process goes and the build out on the need, maybe it'll all, right.
And to be clear, ma'am, because I feel like there could be some confusion over this. In early December, we're not coming in looking for a building permit. This is for the site plan review. There's a tremendous amount of work and approvals and conditions and everything that have to be met in order for us to apply for the building permit. So it's this interim period of operating. If things aren't ready, we're not going to be trying to start growing. We're not going to be ready to start growing the product until later in the year. So
I guess that it confuses me a little bit. If you have the fallback plan to be using propane to run the business, but you say it will take 5 months to get the connection to the natural gas, it's going to take you more than 5 months to build it. So why would you need the propane? Why would you need the tanks? Why would you need the 21 trucks a week to supply you with fuel when you've got a fuel source right there? I don't understand why you have a contingency plan.
Exactly. If the fuel source is right there and it's ready to go and it's ready when we're looking to start operating, then there's absolutely.
Well, I just heard it was 5 to 9 months to get that connection in. Is that what I heard?
The review process, correct?
So I guess that's the question, is how long does it take to go through the review process, do the connection, and to get it up and running?
It's very, you can't predict the regulatory process with total certainty. Once we make our filing with the DP, we expect to get a response or an approval within 4 to 9 months. Once we get that approval, we think that we can put the meter in place in 2 to 3 months.
Still a lot less time than it's going to take you to build your buildings.
Not necessarily. I think what we've been saying is probably the end of 2019 is when we might be expecting or anticipating the gas to be ready. Hopefully a little bit earlier than that, the electricity to be ready from National Grid. And we anticipate the construction of the initial phases of the facility to be ready in parallel about the same time.
And one clarification. We're in the process of starting to develop that filing with the DPU, so it's going to take us 2, maybe 3 months to make that filing. So that's on the front end, and then you have the review process, and then the construction process.
Right.
Quick question. Can Valley Green Grow operate the factory and the cultivation center without the cogen?
I'm going to take a stab at parts of it can be operated in the absence of cogen. I think as Mike Thornton had mentioned, there's going to be electricity from the grid, and there needs to be a fuel source for environmental control, for providing environmental control. Parts of it can operate for some period without actual cogeneration. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Which parts?
It's built in stages. So can the full facility operate in the absence? I don't think we're designing it that way. We're not designing it that way.
So you wouldn't call cogen incidental or subordinate?
I don't understand the question.
What's your primary means? Cogen or the grid?
The primary means is cogeneration.
Thank you. So, we will continue this hearing to November 14th.
I'd like to make a motion to continue to November 14th.
All in favor?
Aye. Topics.
What's this gonna
We haven't adjourned the meeting.
Yeah, people, if you want to take it outside,
If you
please.
wanna, we still have to finish the rest of our meeting just because we love staying here so late, so if you,
You're welcome to stay, but you gotta be quiet.
I'm out.
everybody leave before the alarm goes off.
And that's the first side, so.
Well, I'll send you the print
Online. Yep, you're online. You're
Drew,
on, yep.
Drew, what's the YouTube website for the town to watch the meetings?
TV Charlton, Mass.
TV Charlton, Mass.
TV Charlton. YouTube, yeah, just look for TV Charlton on YouTube. Just have a whole list of all the meetings.
All right, thank you. Yeah, have a good night, thank you. Thanks, Drew.
We lost it.
Yeah.
We have, we have a tripartite agreement, do we not?
Yeah, we signed that already.
So planning board business, we have a minutes. I just want to double check with Bill. Thank you.
I know we got one more thing. I know that, the building committee for the new town safety building project, they're looking for a representative for the planning board to sit on their, meeting. I'd be more than happy to.
We would love you to do it.
Just want one member.
Yeah. 774 922 7022.
Can you take an early morning call?
I can do whatever.
I'll call you somewhere around 8.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good night, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
You could serve as a backup if you need.
Yeah, yeah,
I make a
absolutely.
motion that Ross serve as the planning board rep,
Yeah.
the building committee.
Make a motion?
I make a motion.
Second?
For the public safety building, they're just looking for a representative from the planning board to sit in.
Which is perfect, because then you can make sure that up front, you know, that is right.
Oh, yeah, so they follow the process,
Perfect.
like what easy
Like we should
route to make
do
it
the whole
simple
thing.
for them.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Is there?
What was that?
Ross is going to represent the planning board on the new safety complex building.
Yeah, I've gotten requests from a fellow member of that.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
he's up to finance, so.
Okay. And is there anything else that you want to discuss
No.
that we are?
Troublemaker.
All right. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.